Okay, it is May 2nd. It's 12 noon. This is a regular assembly meeting. And we have a full assembly here today. I'll call the meeting to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Thomas,
Here.
Scott,
Here.
Jeff, Bob,
Here.
David,
Here.
Donna,
Here.
Mark,
Here. Okay, it's now time for our voluntary pledge of allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Looking for a motion to approve the minutes from April 17th, 2023.
So move. Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? It passes unanimously. Brings us to item 4 on today's agenda, amendment and approval of the meeting agenda. Are there any proposed changes? Member Mucci.
Thank you. Under item 17A, just a brief report on last week's Public Safety Advisory Board meeting.
Okay. Remind me if I forget. Making a note here. Okay, if there's no other proposed amendments, all those in favor of the agenda as presented with the one addition, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, we'll move forward with what we've got there. Bid awards, there are none today. That brings us to item 7. And this is persons to be heard related to items on today's agenda. So step to the microphone, state your name and who you represent, please. And there is a 5-minute testimony, 5-minute limit on all testimonies, so.
We're RD and Madonna Parks. We represent ourselves. We are RD and Madonna Parks, parents of Molly Parks, are in support of action item 15J, Borough Hiring Procedures Review. Assembly members Newman and Mucci request Assembly approval to direct Borough Administration to hire an independent specialist to review the borough's current hiring procedures. We appreciate the borough is taking this step. We're hoping it will widen the scope of this review to include past hiring procedures back to 2015. The community needs to have a better system in place than there was on July 4th, 2016. We're also hoping the safety awareness within the borough will be part of this review as well. We cannot stress enough that safety should be the #1 concern and responsibility of every borough employee. These responsibilities should be clearly defined and included as an element in every borough employee's performance evaluations. Accountability is key to ensure the safety of all borough employees and the citizens of Petersburg. An additional positive step would be changing the municipal code to require that the borough assembly be informed of all lost time accidents and incidents, and having 2 assembly members assigned to an accident review team. As safety is the main goal overall, we suggest the borough consult with a safety expert. A safety expert can recognize and evaluate workplace hazards, as well as evaluate practices and procedures. A safety expert would also be invaluable in the hiring process in developing qualifications for each position. Another tool in safety awareness is an after-action report. The borough should have an after-action report every time there's a lost time accident. It's an opportunity to learn from mistakes and make changes to prevent them from happening in the future. In doing an after-accident report, safety policies, protocols, and implementation procedures can be reviewed to determine where the shortfall came from. A safety team comprised of several assembly members, the employee supervisor, and the city manager could be assigned to go over the report. A big part of any safe work environment should be communication. Talking about safety at a weekly or monthly safety meeting will keep safety on everyone's mind. The borough's safety culture can only be strengthened and enhanced if there is a continual communication between staff and employees. Finally, we need to talk about how the borough going forward deals with the injury or death of a borough employee. The borough needs to develop and put in place a plan to support families of employees who are injured or killed on the job. An employee's family is entitled to know what happened to their loved one. The borough's response needs to be swift transparent, and compassionate. We are grateful the Assembly is taking the time and energy to prioritize the safety of the employees and citizens of the Petersburg Borough. And we would like to thank our friends and family for their continued support as well. We'd like to thank Sina Martinez for coming here today.
Okay, thank you for your testimony today. Anybody else like to speak to items related to today's agenda?
I'm Julianne Thompson, speaking for myself. Agree with everything that RD just said. I think an independent review is the very least that the Assembly can do to follow up on that really tragic event. So I thank you for bringing that up, and I hope that you can move forward and progress with that. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Probably the easiest way, just if you want to speak, someone gets done, just get up and then I don't have to.
I have some place to put my paper here. I'm Mary Clemens and I'm representing myself. I'm asking you, the Assembly, to support agenda item 15J to have an independent specialist review borough hiring practices. We can't change what happened on July 4th, 2016, but we can learn from it so it doesn't happen again. While the crash was not foreseen, it was preventable. It was not a purely out of the blue accident. Many factors led up to it. These factors are what we need to know about so they won't be repeated in the future. A few people know what all the factors were and have undoubtedly learned from it and changed. I'm asking for transparency so many more people can learn from this tragedy too. It may not be the borough involved next time. The lessons learned could help a private business or any organization that hires employees. People need to know what happened, to learn from it, and prevent it from happening again.
Thank you for your testimony.
Hello, my name's Ted Sanhofer, and I'm commenting on agenda item 15J also. You know, I appreciate the members of the Assembly looking into the hiring process, but I think there still is some reluctance by the borough to look into the incident of July 2016. Now that the litigation is over, I think that they need to look into it further. I know some people say that what good could come from digging up all the emotions and hurt that was caused during that incident. But sometimes you need to open up a wound in order for it to heal all the way. You know, the Forest Service many years ago implemented a program titled Learning from Unintended Outcomes. This program looks into incidents that resulted in serious injury or death. It's not to look into shame and blame, but why something happened and ways to improve a system so it doesn't happen again. Let me say again that it's not about pointing fingers and saying you did wrong. It's about learning and healing. I don't think the community can afford not to do everything in our power to prevent a future incident like this or some other incident. I think we would be dishonoring the people involved, especially Molly and Marie, if we didn't learn and set safeguards so that something like this doesn't happen again. You know, the real test of an organization and community's character and values are how they react in diversity and controversy. I think this is one of those times where we got to step up and deal with this. It's going to be hard, but I think we need to. You know, and I have to go back to the word healing. You know, this town hasn't healed yet, and I think it needs to. And I think that we need to progress that along and come to a healing process. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for your service. Thanks.
Thank you for your testimony. Anybody else like to speak on items related to the agenda?
Yes, I am Kelly O'Soup and I'm here representing myself. And I am here also to support, as RD and Madonna shared with you, that thorough third-party independent review. I also feel that like only focusing on the hiring practices is a shortfall. So I would like to see safety practices. You know, I'm not aware if the borough has a safety officer, how those things are communicated from department heads up to the assembly and our city managers. I think it also needs to include our communications practices between department heads. So I think, you know, hiring practices is great, but I feel like in terms of like what I'm aware of that incident, there were so many factors at play. So safety and communications, and like, you know, Ted was talking about the safety culture. I think that is a big big ticket item to focus on. So I'd just like to voice my support for everything already shared.
For your testimony. Anybody else with items related to today's agenda?
Hi, I'm Bill Tremblay, representing myself. I also want to note my support for moving ahead with an independent specialist looking at the hiring practices. The document presented by Assembly Member Fine Walsh last meeting was part of the discussion. And I do agree with what was initially asked, is that the discussion be postponed, because I did not find that a couple hours before the meeting, having this document available was sufficient to really look in what it said and what was needed beyond what was addressed. Hiring practices is one thing, and adopting better ones is good. It's noted heavily in that document too that it dealt with a lot with persons with disabilities and hiring practices and the privacy that's afforded to that person. It seems to me like implementing better practices for how you run your crew would also be needed along with that, because if a person comes to your crew with a certain privacy allocated to them, it's unfair to the people working in your crew, not knowing what shortcomings might be happening in your crew, the limitations of that person, and whether or not they're trained enough in any safety regards to be able to respond to an accident if someone has one. So I think looking beyond just the hiring practices is needed. There's been the previous speakers have mentioned that several times. And I guess that's most of it. Just like I said, I'd also like to, besides the hiring practices, reinforce the need for additional training, safety training, and a better notification process for when accidents happen. I do know at the time of that accident happened that there were a lot of people out of town at that time. My wife was the acting mayor at the time, and we got a phone call in Portland when this down in visiting family at that time, and she couldn't do anything being out of town like that, but it noted some deficiencies, even the standard protocol that you have in this community regarding an accident like that, being able to get to the right people quickly at the right time and keeping track. So thank you for that.
Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else like to speak on items related to today's agenda?
Hello, my name is Nicole McMurrin, Petersburg resident. I too would like to address the matter of looking into the events, practices, communications, safety protocols around July 4th, 2016. I really appreciate the consideration of the Assembly. I don't think these are matters that you're accustomed to dealing with or plan on dealing with when you raise your hand for this type of service. It's difficult for all of us to stand up today. You can hear the emotion in people's voices. And I'm a short little thing, so I got to bring that back down there. Thank you. This morning, I spent some time on the phone with Dr. Rebecca Fox from Texas State University, who is practiced in conducting facilitated learning analyses when these types of critical incidents occur. And she shared with me some really great ideas and resources that we could utilize to conduct such a review. And one message that she really brought home was that we need to manage the stress that came along with this incident. And we need to recognize the trauma that this community has felt along with the families that have been impacted. Ted spoke of healing. It's needed. And we need some genuine expertise to kind of walk us through a process, to look to what brought us to this point, where there's a room full of people saying, hey, what happened? And why didn't you talk to me about it? We need to talk about it because that's how things heal. We have a lot of resources locally. We've got resources across the, we're not the first people to think, hey, we need to look back at a critical incident and figure out how to do it better and how to manage better. So it's not just the events of that day, it's the continuing line of events and things that happened afterwards that we also need to consider. And sadly plan for, because we're human and accidents happen. So I'm happy to pass on ideas and resources as the assembly moves forward to create a framework for this review, as it is in my heart of hearts, my hope that you will do. Thank you kindly.
Thank you for your testimony.
Good afternoon. I'm Tom Parker, and I fully support the Proposition 15J. And I don't think I could say it any more poetically than what Ted or Nicole or some of the others are going to say and have said. But I do believe that further inquiry about all this, safety practices today, tomorrow, and yesterday. So I strongly support it, and thank you guys for being on board. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, anybody else want to speak related to the agenda?
Hi, my name is Marcia Sandhopper and I represent myself and only myself. I wanted to address the council today regarding the request by RD Madonna Parks, along with many others, including myself, to call for an independent third-party investigation. But in regards to item 15J on the agenda, well, I thank those assembly members that actually went forward and put that on there. I can't say I'm fully in support of it because it's not enough. It's not enough to just talk about hiring practices, hiring policies. I mean, look at the economy today. People are begging for employees. You think that someone's really going to turn someone down as an employee if they're totally qualified, but you have something. Anyhow, sorry. I was insulted. I think it's kind of like a token gesture that something else needs to be added to that. I think there's employees of the borough that, because it affects them so personally, I realize the problems and the feelings that this causes the assembly to want to take a look. But I don't think it's fair to ignore the people just so you can, maybe protect the feelings or the health or something of one or two individuals. I hold nothing against them. I agree with everyone said about being transparent. I think that's a big component of this. I want to add, I'm not myself asking for a witch hunt. That's not what this is about. These borough employees, they're our friends and our neighbors. I mean, we care about them. We're not after heads. If there was heads that should have rolled, I mean, they've walked off a long time ago. There's really, so in closing, nothing can be done to bring back Molly and Marie. There's no righting that wrong, but what we can do is right the way the victims' families are treated after something like this. I think in this day and age, there's a huge lack of faith in government in general. And I think looking into something like this and doing the right thing, no matter how hard that is, would go a really long way in restoring people's faith in government. And thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Ma'am, would you like to speak?
My name is Cindy Lynn. I'm representing myself. I don't have any notes and I hope the timer just started because I have a lot to share. I've tried to follow over the last 7 years, as most of our town has, of the Marie and Molly's tragic death. And I understand the difficult situation all the city employees, the assembly members, everybody is in because of attorneys today and liability. And if we say something was done wrong and negligence happened, which it seems to be the case for sure, then you will be sued as an individual and as a city. And so there's silence, there's a coldness, and there's no healing. I'm embarrassed as a member of this terrific community. We are not in Los Angeles. We are not in Seattle. And to have it treated legally by our Assembly Member Walsh with goals and objectives and a bill somewhat like Congress does, where we'll offshoot it to Ketchikan and check with Sitka. Why do we need to do that? From an editorial, it sounds like this gentleman who was disabled did not reveal that, but had two and apparently 2 seizures at the Parks and Recs Department. He was still given the keys to a car. Now, that was a mistake. The person, whoever made that error, is gone, I'm sure. But that was wrong. And to pull the Americans with Disabilities Act, which I'm very familiar with as a blind citizen, that is not to allow disabled people to do whatever they want in a job. That is to accommodate someone reasonably based on what that entails. That does not allow a seizure disordered person to drive a car. That does not allow me as a nurse to work at our hospital and pass out medications. Okay, it's to accommodate someone based on the size of the facility, the number of employees, physical accommodation, or like in my case, it would be a talking computer. We have vocational rehabilitation people in Sitka that come here regularly that could help with that. We don't need another agency involved. This seems like common sense to me. Not only were his background referrals checked, they were not checked before he was hired, it seems, because he had 2 seizures in town. And it seems more of negligence background checks, as everybody in town knows, checks a criminal record. And we know from the court report that crimes aren't prosecuted. So what good would a background check do? It doesn't give HIPAA releases for medical information. And this was horrible. I also suggest 2 things possibly. Number 1, that every July 3rd or 4th, this town gets to meet at Sons of Norway or someone and talk about this and hug the family and say, we are so sorry. This family had, I don't know about Marie's family, but I know that Molly's family, that's her only child. There's nothing that will ever remove their pain. I was a pediatric nurse at Children's. I saw many families lose their children, and there is nothing that can be done except to say wrong was done. And I think a scholarship, if there isn't one, I would give money to a scholarship regularly to these girls in whatever the family chooses. But to sweep it under the rug and to go with the job description apparently was there. This man shouldn't have been driving a car. We don't need a new job description. We don't need new safety things. That would be fine if you want to do that, but it's just common sense. Now I want to finish with that because I still have a few more minutes, I think. On the agenda, or unrelated, I guess, I don't know, is the medical center. I shall say real quickly that the breakdown of the funding for the medical center is zip. All of it is maybe. 8 million might be secured. All the rest is proposed, 2 through Senator Murkowski, maybe, and 1 through Senator Peltola, maybe, 1 through the Denali Commission.
That isn't an item on today's agenda.
Excuse me, let me finish, please. And from what I read in the paper, I could be wrong, but they are not secured.
You have 15 seconds.
Okay, they are not secured. I'm worried this is going to be made shovel ready. They don't get the funding, and then what? Are we going to feel sorry that they've done all this work and money and say, oh, it's okay, we'll pay for the hospital. We
Sorry,
feel
ma'am,
bad.
you've reached your 5
Thank you.
minutes. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak to items related to today's agenda?
Hello, thank you, guys and gals.
And I'm going to say one thing.
Yes, sir.
In future testimonies, you're addressing the whole assembly. You're not
Yes,
pointing out one assembly member.
no, I did, yeah,
So
okay.
just
Well,
for
thank you.
everybody's.
Yeah, well, thank you,
So
Mayor
everybody knows,
Jensen
okay.
and assembly members.
Go ahead,
I-
Mr.
sorry.
Bernoulli.
This is Joe Bertignoli. I'm representing myself. Everybody comes up here with notes but me and Cindy. And I appreciate that. So I'm just gonna reiterate, or not reiterate, just agree with a lot that was said today. The Parks made very valid points. Ted Sandhofer made very valid points. Nicole made very valid points, and I can say I agree with all of them. One thing that I did hear about is from, I believe, Nicole, is after an incident, you have a critical incident debriefing. And I don't know whether that ever happened amongst, it probably happened against maybe the police, and I'm sure it did against EMS, because being on EMS a long time, anytime we have an incident like that, we go up the hall and we debrief after it for however long it takes for anybody to air it out. A lot was done wrong in events leading up to that and events after that. I appreciate the agenda item, but I think it needs to be expanded. The scope needs to be expanded to cover that, those incidences that, events leading up to weeks before, days before, hours before, and then shortly thereafter. So I'd like to see that independent, I urge independent, transparent investigation into this incident without any, borough employees or borough people involved, and see what comes of it. I know it's churning up things that were done 7 years ago, and I heard a statement today already, and I forgot it already, but it's something about unintended consequences that can lead up if you churn something up like this. But I think we owe it to the Parkses, the Giesbrecks, we owe it to everybody that was involved. And I even saw we had a letter from one of the survivors of that car, and she wants to see answers too, whether she ever received answers, and she was as close to that incident as more than any of us here, other than, responders. But so I'd just like to see that agenda item expanded a little bit, other than just hiring practices, to include the specifics on this incident especially. And yeah, I urge you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else in the audience with items related to today's agenda?
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Borough Assembly members. I'm Tom Abbott, and first I'm going to speak personally as a parent with children that were friends with the kids. I want to add my name as well, that to everything that's been said, and I think we all feel the same in this community. So, in not my first awkward or lousy segue, I'm going to switch over to I'm general manager of KFSK, and I'm here representing KFSK. So thank you for including KFSK in the proposed budget. The community service grant is critical to KFSK's operating budget, as it helps support the round-the-clock service to the community. The borough government receives extensive coverage from KFSK with hundreds of public service announcements annually for the various departments. And sometimes very timely announcements are necessary. KFSK is an important partner in the local emergency planning and response. KFSK provides vital and timely information to the citizens of the borough. An informed public with the ability to hear the full deliberation of public meetings is made possible by KFSK's commitment to a mission of service. Thank you for supporting KFSK through the community service grant that's in the budget.
Your testimony, Mr. Abbott. Anyone else with items? Oh, there we go.
Hi, my name is Michelle Parker, and I'm here on behalf of myself. I'm here to show support for RD and Madonna. And I too agree with everything everyone said. I'd like to see an independent, transparent review, not just of the hiring practices, but specifically the safety, the awful events that led up to that tragedy on July 4th, 2016. I know we can never change that outcome, but I hope that we can heal from it and that we can make changes moving forward, and that'll help us heal even more with those changes. So thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else with views on today's agenda, related to today's agenda?
Dorothy McBride, I'm representing myself. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to the Borough Assembly and the audience. I'd like to go on record supporting 15J, that action item. I appreciate the Assembly members calling that forth. I'd encourage that it be expanded as needed to cover the before, during, and after. Huge tragedy, and to be able to learn things that can prevent things like that from happening. It's just critical. And I appreciate you guys bringing it up as an item, an action item, and I hope that you go forward with it so that the tragedy for these two girls, for the families, and for the community can be dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony today. Anyone else with items or issues related to today's agenda?
My name is Marge Oinus, and I'm speaking representing myself. One of the things that Cindy said that really touched my heart was the idea of being honest. And it's sad to me that we need courts to tell us what's right and wrong. And it's a scary thing to say, I made a mistake, especially when you can be sued. I'm a retired RN. And when you're an RN working in the hospital, if you make a mistake and don't admit it, it's terrifying. And it's terrifying if you do admit it. I remember one day driving home from work, and I remembered that I had forgotten to give a patient in ICU a medication. And at that point, I had to make a decision. Will I be honest? No one will know. Or will I just go home and forget about it? I got home and I thought, I have got to be honest about this. What could it mean? It could mean I lose my job. I called the hospital. I called the floor that it was on, and I said, this is what I have done. Please tell the doctor and tell me what to do. I felt scared to death before I made that call. I felt scared to death when I made it. But when I was done, I felt free. I felt so glad that the cost, honesty is worth the cost, to admit little things and big things. And I just, what else can I say?
Thank you for your testimony today. Anyone else in the audience with views related to today's agenda?
Good afternoon. My name is Dan Sullivan, representing myself. I want to thank the assembly members for bringing up item 15J, and I say I'm in support of it. I want to stress that I don't fully know all of the ins and outs of every detail that the city's done in response to this this tragedy, but I support this as a first step in preventing any future issues or accidents that we have. So thank you for bringing this up.
Thank you for your testimony today. Anyone else in the audience with views related to the agenda?
Going to switch gears a little bit. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm representing myself as a resident of the borough, but also as a parent of two Petersburg School District students, a parent of a PHS graduate and myself a graduate, but I also happen to have served on the school board for the last 14 years. I know a huge part of your job as an assembly member is the budget, and I do appreciate all the time and energy in developing it each year and working with borough staff. I'm here to urge you to approve the full financial request from the school district. This is the minimum the district will need to sustain and continue its current academic, sports, and non-sport programs, excuse me, at the district. The additional contribution only gets us to $300,000 fund balance, which is not even 1 month of expenditures, but it does get us back in the black and balanced. If the state does come through with additional one-time funding, that will simply give us a fund balance that may or may not be adequate. However, we can't depend on that happening, so the district needs the entire requested amount. It has been suggested that maybe the district should first consider cutting programs or maybe increasing the number of students in classrooms in lieu of the increase. This would be something we would have to consider, but only if the borough was in dire straits as well and also doing the same thing. cutting programs, services, and jobs. But that's not the case. Currently, the borough has over $1 million of unanticipated revenue from last year. And if I understood it correctly from a previous meeting, over 7 months of reserves when the recommended amount is 4 to 6. So it does appear that the borough has enough money to fully fund the request from the borough. I do believe it's our moral obligation and financial obligation to provide a solid education to all of Petersburg's school children, whether they're homeschooled and come in for programs or whether they're fully public school children. It can be one of the biggest impacts we can have on this community. If I really urge you to pass the budget as presented, and I'm thankful very much for your careful consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else in the audience with views related to items on today's agenda?
Hello, I'm Laura Bueller, and this is my husband, Craig Bueller. We represent ourselves. Hello, Mr. Mayor, members of the Assembly. I'm here in support of the Borough Hiring Procedures Review as related to the crash that took the lives of Molly Park and Marie Giesbrecht and injured Catherine Cardenas. Thank you to the Assembly members who brought this forward, and thank you to the Assembly member who created the report at the last meeting. These efforts are appreciated, and there's more to be done. These are a few pieces of a 500 or 1,000 piece puzzle, and I hope that the item on today's agenda can be expanded to include safety policies and procedures, and also the evolution of policies and procedures beginning before this horrific incident occurred is in order. Please consider this as well as the many questions raised by those assembled here. I appreciate and agree with the views of many who spoke earlier, including Madonna R.D. Parks, Nicole McMurrin, and Ted Sandhofer. And I appreciate your moving forward with this in the hopes of healing for the families and for the community. Thank you so much for your service.
Thank you for your testimonies today. Anyone else in the audience with views related to items on today's agenda? Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is 8, and this is persons to be heard with issues unrelated to items on today's agenda. Anybody want to speak on items that aren't on the agenda today? Okay, seeing none, we'll move forward. Item 9, boards, commission, and committee reports. There are none today. Consent agenda, no discussion there today as well. Report of other officers. Item A is supposed to be a presentation by the medical center, and I understand the CEO, Mr. Hofstadter, will not be with us today, and member Len has something to say in regards to the report, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Mr. Hofstadter asked me to make sure that I announced that May 10th, save that date, and that's the day for the public open house meeting, looking to replacement facility for the hospital. It'll be at the Holy Cross House at Petersburg Lutheran Church from 11 to 7 p.m. The representatives from Bettysworth North, their project architect will be there, along with the drawings, schematics, everything, which will be posted there. During the day, there will be several numerous presentations by the architect. Will give you a chance to look at any time, look at all the maps that are on the wall, look at the drawings. There will be a chance, I think board members will be there all through the day, give you a chance to talk to board members, to look at to give your comments to them, and then also to talk to the architects that are there to look at the options and so forth. You can come and go anytime you want to, and it will give you a chance to express all your concerns to the board members. Thank you.
Okay, and with that being said, thank you, Member Len. You could go online if you want to see Mr. Hofstadter's report for today on the agenda. So it's listed here. So if you're interested, it's under 11A. Okay, so the next item is the Forest Service update. Petersburg District Ranger Bourne will update the Assembly on Forest Service activities and projects. Mr. Bourne.
Good afternoon, District Ranger Ray Bourne from representing the Tongass National Forest. Thank you, Assembly members, for letting me come in and talk with you today. Several topics to go over. I'll try to breeze through them because you have a full agenda today. First one, talk about timber sales. The Thomas Bay timber sale is out for public comment through Friday. If you want to make a comment on the activity, please look on the website and make a comment on that, and we'll be able to move forward with that process. The Cake Access Road timber, we're doing a scaling of the logs that are decked along that road, and that process will happen sometime later this month when we get in there and able to deck that and then figure out what to do with that timber that still exists along that roadside up there. That's the big things on timber. We have some small sales going on as usual, but nothing out there significant at this time. Any questions on timber sales stuff?
Any questions of Mr. Bourne on the timber sales?
Okay, thank you.
Seeing none.
Talk about hiring. We had a pretty successful hiring effort with the Anoka Blitz, which is the local hiring effort. We had 15 positions to hire. We hired about 10 people. So we're kind of along the way. We're going to take another shot at it later down the road. But additionally, we hired on a forester that has just started. With a young lady's come on board working in the forestry area for us. We'll train her for another year before she's fully successful and up to the full speed on that. We're also advertising for a new archaeologist, a recreation staff officer, a recreation planner, a NEPA planner, and additional administrative support person. That announcement came out on Monday. So people in the community that are interested in that kind of work, please look on the USA Jobs website and apply for those positions. We're again trying to continue to fill all the positions we need here on the district. Lots of effort kind of throughout the state of Alaska. We're doing all this together. The new thing on the agenda is Southeast Alaska Sustainable Strategy for Forest Management. That's a new process with lots of government funding on there, and the intent is to collaboratively identify projects and priorities with our partners, and then the forest management project for over the next 10 years. So that's kind of our window we want to look at. What do we need to do in the next 10 years? And looking at multiple resource activities with one effort. So combining things like a timber sale and restoration project on a stream and a recreation project and things like that, putting it all together to kind of make one big project as we go forward with that. We've completed the public meetings for the SAS FM. We did one here in Petersburg and one in Cake. And now we're at the point where we can have additional input provided through the end of June. And you can do that either online or you can come see me, and we have papers. And I also passed out to assembly members, SAS FM sheet there. There's a QR code on there. You can go onto that and take a look at that and have input there. There's 3 areas of input. Number one is what's of value to you? What should we work on? Number 2, where should we do it at? And when should we do that? And number 3 is how should we assess what the priorities are? So you can do all of that using that link onto that website on there. And there's a story map on there. So we talk about where and when. You can click a point on the story map and fill in what you need us to do. If you're concerned with that, come into the office. We'll help you do it. But you can go on the site and do it yourself, whatever works best for you. We're looking forward to maybe another community event later in June to get more feedback from the community. Now they've had some time to think about it and look at it a little bit and figure out where we're going to go with this process. This will also feed into the forest plan revision that will start in October. So this will be kind of information, part of the base that feeds into that information as well. We'll talk more about that as we get further down that road. Any questions on SAS FM? It's a pretty big project and there's lots of information out there for everybody. Okay. Thank you. Going on to cabins and trails. Not much change in the cabins since I last talked to everybody. We're still in the NEPA process, assessing the 9 sites. We do have an additional site we added over the winter after looking at one. We said this is not the best one. We kind of moved out to about mile 21 on Mitkoff Highway out by Omer Creek. Okay, looking at a site there. We'll have the analysis done probably by the 1st of June, and then we'll kind of move forward with the process to get it out for public comment as to what does the public think about that process with that. On the trail work side, Mitkoff Trail Maintenance will be done by a seasonal crew this year, coming on board, some students, SCAs, and things like that will do some of that. The Hill Lake Bridge contract has been let. That work starts on May 8th, bringing a new bridge on that trail there in the 3 Lakes Loop area to improve that access down there as well. The Omer Creek Bridge replacement is still in the design phase. We're trying to figure out what the best design is to replace that floating bridge that's starting to sink. So we're trying to figure out a better way to get across there. It's a valuable trail, but we still want to get that work done here. The Petersburg Lake Trail work will start on Kupernoff Island, right across here in Kupernoff this summer with a crew going out there, and they've already started. They've done some initial assessment, cleared some of the trail. but they'll be working on that for the next 3 years to get that trail up to speed up there. And finally, Cathedral Falls Trail in the vicinity of Cake has been solicited for a contract, it's a technical relocation of that trail because of the difficult terrain it's in. So that contract is out on the street right now, asking for bids on that one. That's cabins and trails. Anything on that?
Yeah, I have one question on the Almer Creek Bridge replacement. Is that the one on the main highway or on Woodpecker Cove?
That's the one that goes across the Muskeg, that real long floating bridge. As you get off the highway and you go down the trail and you cross the road and you go around and you cross the Muskeg. Yeah, that floating bridge there that's kind of wet.
This is a footbridge, correct?
What's that?
Foot traffic bridge?
But yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
that's that one. Yeah.
Member Marsh.
Yes, I do have a question. So when this work is undergoing, will it be still accessible to the public? Or are you closing off segments of these trails while the improvements are made?
When the bridge work is being done, you definitely can't get across those areas. So we'll have to close down those trails, generally speaking. Cathedral Falls right now, quite frankly, is closed. It's not passable. Same thing with Peters, up to Peters Lake Trail. I talked to people in Kupernoff the last couple of months, and yeah, it's hazardous trying to get up there. So, and we have a lot of blowdown last winter. So all our trails have blowdown on them right now, and our crews are out trying to clear them and trying to make them accessible. So we'll have some accessible, but when we're working and doing this technical work, we definitely need to close the trail down.
Any other questions on cabins and trails? Thank you, Mr. Bourne.
Okay, last thing I want to talk about is the Southeast, the Secure Rural Schools Act or Advisory Committee. We are looking for more members. I did pass out to everybody a flyer. We need about 10 more people to join us on those particular committees. That's an opportunity with several $1 million in play to support community projects for the South Tongass. Please take some time and apply if you're interested. If not, please give me a call. I'd like to recruit each and every one of you to be part of that. I need 10 more people, like 1, 2, 3. I can almost make it. So please help us with that. It's an opportunity to do. There's lots of money in the bank. It's bankrolled every year. There's more money added in. We haven't spent any for several years now. So now is a good time to get involved with that. That's all I have.
Any questions of Mr. Bourne? Okay, thank you for your report today.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to item 12, the mayor's report, short report today. I'd like to show appreciation for a job well done to 2 employees. The Alaska Water Wastewater Management Association recently selected Mike Bell, the borough's water operations supervisor, as Small System Manager of the Year. And Justin Haley, the borough's wastewater operations supervisor, as Small Wastewater System Person of the Year. They will both be recognized for their excellent work for our community at the annual conference this month in Anchorage. Congratulations to both Supervisor Bell and Supervisor Haley, and thank you for your service to Petersburg. Next item is just to let people know that the National Marine Fisheries Service public hearing on threatened listing determination for the sunflower sea star under the Endangered Species Act. They're going to have meetings around the state. And the meeting in Petersburg is May 10th from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. And it related to their March 16th proposed rule to list the sunflower sea star as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. Written public comments are due no later than May 15th, 2023, and may be submitted via the federal e-rulemaking portal. All these addresses are in the mayor's report today on the borough website. So I don't think anybody would have time to write them down if I went through them. So they're accessible to the people. And that is the end of my manager's report or mayor's report. It's time for the manager's report.
Thank you, sir. Spring road maintenance is ongoing with grading, pothole repair, street washing, and street sweeping as the weather permits. Thanks to local contractor Rock and Road, they've acquired some equipment to do chip seal surfacing for DOT's culvert replacement project. We've been discussing the possibility of doing some chip seal work on Borough streets as well if they are able to offer this type of service and local road maintenance. This would likely require some additional funding beyond what has traditionally been provided for local street maintenance. We'll keep in touch with Rock and Road and bring projects forward if they become important, pertinent. Building maintenance crew has begun framing work on the new sewer parts shed at Public Works site, and the construction will be completed as time permits. Sirens will be tested again on Wednesday, May 3rd at noon. This will be a steady sound siren and will last for 30 seconds. The sirens will now be on a monthly test schedule on the first Wednesday of the month at noon. Fire department hosted a family fun day on April 22nd. Thanks to many volunteers who helped run this event. We estimate about 80 people attended. Thanks to Papa Bears for their longstanding support and donation of the ice cream. Aaron attended the State Emergency Operations Committee, the LEPCA conference on April 17th through the 22nd. A separate report will be sent out regarding that event. Josh and Ryan attended the Arson Investigator Conference in Sitka, also on the April 17th through the 21st. Ryan was able to renew his investigator credentials, and Josh is just waiting to hear back if he passed his test. If Josh was successful, he will be able to fill in or assist Ryan if required. The volunteer fire department will join public health as a local Narcan distributor. These kits are provided by the state and are used to counteract the effects of opiates, which in the event of an overdose can result in respiratory arrest. Kits have been delivered, and the volunteer fire department has started distribution. Contact Aaron at 907-772-3355 for more information. Currently working on replacing the smoke detectors at assisted living and waiting for the new Hoyer lift. Our new med card arrived last week and is working great. Derek, Casey and I met with Phil and Kirsten Testoni to discuss the next steps with assisted living. The hospital began helping us out with Medicaid billing using an MOA, and is helping us out on the temporary absence of Nurse Mindy. Thanks to help from the hospital, Derek was able to find approximately $100,000 in billing issues that should result in additional payments to the borough. We're also working with the hospital to set up kind of an adult day services, daycare, whatever you want to call it, at elderly housing in their dining room. This would be a way for people who are taking care of elders in their home to get a little bit of a break. They'd have nurses present and could drop people off and for short durations and go do errands or just get their hair done, whatever. So we're working on trying to make that work with the Mountain View Food Services folks. Mayor already mentioned Mike Bell and Justin Haley, but add my congratulations to their achievements. Wastewater Department is requesting a partial award for engineering work for the Pump Station 4 replacement. A loan increase through ADEC will be needed to award the bid and construction phase services required on the project, and this is in the works. The EMD 16 overhaul has been ongoing for the last couple of weeks. Various setbacks related to parts and the discovery of additional work have slowed the process. The goal is to complete all the work and place the unit back into service prior to the annual SEPA shutdown. However, parts availability may not allow for this schedule. The contractor is doing all they can to locate the unanticipated parts needs and get the unit back in service. NC Machinery is scheduled to work to rebuild the Caterpillar 398, and that's scheduled to begin on May 4th. It should take a couple of weeks to get the generator cleaned and the engine overhauled, and it should be in service prior to the shutdown as well. McGee Constructors Dawson Joint Venture, who is the contractor for our Blind Slough Hydro project, has agreed to put off the shutdown of Blind Slough Hydro until after the SEPA shutdown. This agreement will help to ensure that Power and Light will have enough resources to provide power to the community during the SEPA outage, regardless of whether the EMD 16 is back in service or not. It will also dramatically reduce the diesel burn and subsequent diesel adjustment charge for the community. Power and Light has rented a pole testing drill to assess the condition of our wooden power poles. The line crew will have a month to get as many poles tested as possible. The equipment will produce a report that indicates the remaining strength of the pole and will allow the department to prioritize replacements over time. Borough attorney and I continue to work with Petro and ADEC on getting a clear understanding of any environmental issues with the Mitkoff Highway warehouse location. There's a site will be closed, meaning DEC won't have much interest, but we do not know if there'll be conditional issues that will remain that we'll have to keep track of. So we're not proceeding with the borough's portion of this until we know what those conditional issues would be. PMEA negotiations are scheduled to begin. They did begin today and will continue this week. We expect much of the conversations to be around wages and the employee costs of healthcare. Stephanie and her team worked through the weekend with staff from Wrangell, Petersburg, and others to renew certifications for lifeguard instructors, water safety instruction, and more. We brought in a trainer for this and then in turn invited all the interested parties to participate. And I've asked Stephanie to take a trip up to Juneau at some point to observe and discuss some of the rehabilitation work being done on one of Juneau's big aquatic centers. We want to take the opportunity to meet some of the people supervising their rehab and make connections with contractors who could help us with some of the next phases needed for our center. It just seems like a really good opportunity to talk to contractors that Juneau's already vetted and just get an idea of what they're capable of. So anyway, that's it. Unless there's other questions.
Questions of the manager? Member Marsh?
I have two. So with McGraw or McGee Constructors agreeing to delay the shutdown of Blind Slough Hydro, will that delay the start time or the finish times of this project?
It should not.
Okay.
We're just moving things around a little bit.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question I have regarding the local Narcan distributors. Are there, what are the statistics for how many kits are distributed? How many are used? Do we have timelines, timeframes, monthly, 6 month, annual?
I cannot answer that. Aaron, are you?
So the state actually collects that information through self-reported surveys that if those kits are used. I keep regular stats on how many I've handed out a month, and I have to turn that back into the state. I do not get to see what public health has also given out, but I could request that information and forward it to you if that's of interest.
Would you do that? May I, through the mayor? That would be awesome to have that number just to see what effect these might be having.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Member Bucci?
Yeah, thank you. On the SEPA shutdown, when is that scheduled to happen?
Yeah, through the mayor, this is Carl. It'll start on May 31st and go till June 9th.
And the other question I had is regarding the chip seal that Rock and Road got a hold of. Are we thinking of doing the road that goes to the drive down dock with that equipment as well, or have we had that discussion?
We haven't had that discussion. I think we originally on the approach to the drive down dock, we're thinking of concrete rather than chip seal, but that was probably before we knew we might have access to chip seal equipment. So I think we'll talk through it. We have a limited budget for streets work. The harbor only has so much money, so we'll try to, and we don't know exactly what Rock and Road is already allocated out for the use of that equipment. So they may not have time this summer to do anything for us. So we're going to work through that with them, and as well as our various projects and try to come up with what we're going to do.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I believe Rock and Road has actually purchased the equipment and it's going to stay on the island, so that might be a benefit.
Yes, sir.
Okay, if there's no other questions of the manager, that brings us to item 14, unfinished business. First item there, the only item there today is ordinance 2023-05. An ordinance updating chapter 17.02 of the municipal code entitled Safety Code Adoption. This is the third and final reading. If approved, this ordinance will update the local amendment to the International Building Code snow load requirement, and 2, adopt a local amendment to the International Residential Code for new insulation values. The Assembly unanimously approved this ordinance in its first and second readings. I would entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its third, or approve it in its third and final reading.
So moved.
Second. Motion's been made by member Mucci, seconded by member Newman. Any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
David,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Scott, Jeff,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes. Okay, ordinance 2023-05 passes unanimously in its third and final reading. Now we're on to new business, item 15. First item there, item A, is ordinance 2023-06. This is an ordinance updating various sections of chapter 14.08 of the municipal code entitled Sewer Utility. If adopted in 3 readings, this ordinance will change the fiscal year 2024 sewer utility rate increase from 3% to 6%. An annual rate review of the utility indicates this increase is needed to keep up with increased costs and expenses to the borough. I'd entertain a motion to approve this ordinance in its first reading.
So move.
Second. Motion's been made by member Mucci, seconded by member Kensinger. Any discussion? Member Lynn?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple questions. When with these rates, will they include the upgrade of pump station 4? Or do these just include the current items that we have online? If
Carl, can you
Carl?
explain?
Yeah, through the mayor. That's a good question. So the rate increases that were programmed into the existing ordinance did account for the capital improvement program that was included in the rate study. There was a certain amount of debt service that was planned for with the 3% per year rate increases that we had in there. Part of the problem with the need for the increase is that basically pump station 4 looks like it's going to absorb all of that debt service in one project. So there are other projects that need to be done, but we'll hold off on those as long as we can until we get a good handle on pump station 4 and move forward. So it's kind of a yes and no. Yes, there was an account for a capital improvement program, but this project has grown much larger than we originally thought it would.
That answer your question?
Yes, do, thank you.
Member Marsh?
Thank you. So when 2026 expires, where are the rates projected? I know it's, the crystal ball is impossible to see. Rarely do prices go down. Will this set a new baseline going forward? Do you foresee?
Through the mayor, yes, that is basically what this ordinance is saying, is that by FY 2026, those are going to be the rates for the wastewater department, and from there, likely will go up again. Not sure when.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on ordinance 2023-06? Clerk, call the roll.
Jeff,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Thomas, Donna,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
David.
Yes. Ordinance 2023 passes unanimously in its first reading today. Next item B, ordinance 2023-07. An ordinance amending sections 14.20, 125, 14.20.250, and 14.20.380 of chapter 14.20 municipal harbors of the Petersburg Municipal Code to address liveaboards and other residential uses of vessels moored in municipal harbors, and to increase the penalty for speeding or excessive wake. Adoptions of this ordinance in 3 readings will update the liveaboard policy to allow no more than 10% of moorage spaces to be utilized by liveaboard vessels. 2, prohibit commercial use of the harbor facilities for rental of vessels for residential purposes. And 3, increase the penalty for speeding or excessive wake in the harbors from $50 to $200. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its first reading.
Second.
Member Mucci, did you make the motion, or member Newman?
Sure.
And seconded by member Kinsey. All kinds of people wanting to be involved. Okay, so had a motion on the second, it's on the floor. Any discussion? Member Kinsinger.
Yes, for the harbor master, just a question, prohibit commercial use of harbor facilities for rental of vessels. Does that mean that a person can't have a vessel in the harbor and Airbnb it, or what exactly does that mean?
That's what we're targeting. Yeah, we're looking at residential reasons for keeping a sailboat in the harbor. I've had that request. Hey, what if I buy a sailboat and Airbnb it? That is going to be cumbersome for us to manage.
But the other question, member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you. 2 questions. What's the percentage now of liveaboards that we have down there?
Across the board, it's probably about 6-7%. come and go, but we're not at the 10% cap. When we propose this, we're looking at the stall length as the basis for our 10% rather than 500. We have 577 stalls, and instead of going for 57 stalls, we're looking at 10% across the board per length of stall. So the big boats will have less of a presence. The smaller boats, there'll be more, which kind of falls in line with our allocation of stalls in the harbor, so that we'd have more to play with where we have more stalls available.
Thank you. And the other question is, what's your vision for enforcing the excessive weight in the harbors?
Well, we, as we do it now, it's just within the harbor itself. It's not, we can't do much about the narrows. So, as we do now, as long as it's on the books, we can enforce through a ticket system. And if we get obnoxious on the other end of our reception of delivering the ticket, then we call this guy who's sitting beside me and he helps me enforce. So that's kind of how we approach things like that in the harbor.
Great, thank you.
Member Marsh?
Thank you. Yes, part of my question was enforcement as well. Also, if we're raising the penalty for excessive speed and causing wakes, are we raising penalties for more than 10% liveaboards, or if not granted on a case-by-case situation? I know somewhere it was a case-by-case scenario. If that is not granted and someone violates that, is there a fine allocation there?
I guess I don't quite, I'm not tracking you.
So if someone goes over the 10%, not that the 11% is the cutoff, and somebody's going to be.
Oh, there's no fine for more liveaboards. It would just be, you can't live aboard your vessel. I mean, that would be.
And reluctant occupants.
Yeah.
And
It's
how are
a
they
theft of
persuaded?
Service. We have those kind of codes
Okay.
on. Yeah.
Okay, very good.
We would enforce it that way.
Thank you.
Member Lim?
Just a question on how did the harbor board and yourself arrive at the 10%?
Well, it's a little bit higher than what we have right now. I proposed it, so I would take ownership of where I came up with 10%. It seems like it's a manageable number. And it's something that I think is a responsible number. So there's no science behind it.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I lost my train of thought there. So the liveaboard situation, the 10%, that's just during the summertime, correct?
Correct.
And that's to accommodate the over 5,000 moorings we have during the
Correct.
course of the year?
Correct.
Okay, so when you say liveaboard, that's permanent liveaboard people. It's not transient fishing boats, for instance, that come in and they're cruising town for 4 or 5 days. That's acceptable if there's room, correct?
Correct.
There's no other discussion on ordinance 2023-07. Will the clerk call the roll?
Thomas,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
Bob, Jeff, David,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Mark.
Yes. Okay, that ordinance passes unanimously in its first reading. That brings us to ordinance 2023-08. This is an ordinance of the Petersburg Borough adopting the budget for the fiscal year July 1st, 2023 through July 30th, 2024. This ordinance will set the Petersburg Borough budget for that 2024 if approved in 3 readings. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance.
So move.
Second.
Motion been made by member Mucci, seconded by member Marsh. This is the first reading of 3. Second reading will also have a public hearing. So with that being said, any discussion? Member Kensinger.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to increase the Mountain View Food Service grant under the Community Service General Fund. It's account 110, it's line 560-506-443 on page 31. Currently, the proposed budget is for $25,000. I'd like to move that up to the request of $42,000, and I forget the odd change. So I'll just make it $43,000 even.
Okay, there's been a motion to up the community food service meals from $25,000 to $43,000. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by member Mutchy. Discussion on the amendment.
Yes. Mr.
Member
Mayor.
Marsh.
Thank you. I guess my question would be, how would this be funded? Have this extra, $18,000?
Manager Giesbrecht, can you answer that?
Well, I was just gonna say through the mayor, Assemblymember Marsh asked the key question. So on any of these adjustments that add to the budget, our finance director has requested that can you also include where we should adjust it from? So do you want us to raise taxes? Do you want us to take it out of reserves? So any adds to the budget, we've got to have a countering ad to backstop it. So where would you like that to come from?
Member Kinzinger, have you given that thought to your motion?
Yes, I have. This will be a very popular one. I got two options. The first option, and I apologize to my colleagues for this, but I feel that service on the Borough Assembly should be a volunteer position. We currently get paid a small stipend. I propose that we give up that stipend. And that's, I believe the budget item on that is, I don't know what it is, approximately $42,000.
So I guess you're adding to your amendment to take away the pay for the Borough Assembly and use that money to supply funds for community meals.
Yes, I was requested by you guys to come up with the funding for that. So that's it.
Okay, the second person who made the second to the motion, are you still seconding the motion with that in it? Since it's been changed, I think we should be,
For point of discussion, sure. Sure.
Okay, so the amendment now is that we take the funding that is used for the salaries, which is high pay, to the assembly and use it for community food services. So that's part of the discussion. So if we approve this, that's where the money's coming from. Am I correct, Clerk Thompson, in assuming that?
I think that charter might talk about, come to think of it, I think charter only talks about the stipend of the assembly changing from time to time by ordinance. So yes, what we would have to do, I think, is just do an ordinance, removing that from the code.
To free up the money to use it for other purposes.
Correct. I would just have to bring a new ordinance before you guys.
Member Kinzinger.
I'd like to point out that the request is only an additional $13,000, and I don't have the exact budget line for that in here. So it wouldn't take the entire amount of the stipend. It would reduce our pay, I believe, by about a third of what we currently get.
18,000. Sorry.
Oh, 18,000. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So excuse me, by half.
Okay, so any other discussion? Member Mutchy.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. So where did the request to increase come from? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out.
It came from the board, I believe, and there's someone in the audience that can explain it if she's willing to. Would you please state your name just so people know who's talking, please?
My name's Angela Davis. I'm the program director for Mountain View Food Services. So you want to know about the request, how it came about, or the increase?
The increase.
So normally we get about $11,000 to $12,000 from you guys from the community services grant. Since 2020, when our rules, or I guess our availability to deliver meals has changed. So we are now allowed to deliver to anybody through COVID. Our numbers have gone through the roof. We have gone from a $32,000 grant to a $104,000 grant through the state. We are still over budget. So far this year, with the cost of food, we have overspent $17,694 just for the first 8 months. So our request to you from the board is just there's just not enough money. It's a donation only program. It's considered for low income, but it's for anyone who's 60 and older or is a spouse of someone who's 6 or older or someone who's disabled living in an assisted living facility. So unfortunately, we cannot ask for money.
Okay, that explains your question. Member Russo?
Sure. And kind of a follow-up, it's donation only, but is there a suggested donation
There-
for,
Sorry, yes.
is there a suggested donation for people who can afford to pay for it, or when was the last time an increase in the fee for dinner looked at?
So there is a suggested donation of $7 for delivered meals, $6 for meals that are allowed in the community dining room, which still has not been resumed yet. The last time it was approved, I was not a part of it. So I'm gonna say that that was about 4.5, 5 years ago. They said they did increase it from 5 to 6 and from 6 to 7.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Angela, for your clarification. Member Lynn?
Yeah, I just have a procedural question for the clerk. So if that's approved, then we would have to go back and then or change the ordinance in the future? What would you see as the process?
So I would bring an ordinance before you at the next meeting for the first reading to lessen the stipends for the assembly, I guess, in order to cover this $18,000.
Thank you.
So with that being said, it seems to me like this motion can't go forward unless we have the funding available for it by taking part of the assembly's wages, if you want to call them wages.
Right, I guess it wouldn't really be finalized until it passed in its third reading, and the budget ordinance needs to be passed prior to the third reading. Maybe you would have to have a special meeting for your third reading. I don't know.
Member Kinsinger?
Well, Mr. Mayor, since it seems to be problematic pulling it out of our salaries, then I suggest that we pull it out of the funding that we have set aside for reserves. I don't have the exact number, but I'm sure Finance Director Jody Tao can tell us. I believe it's over $1 million. What is it, $1,400,000?
General fund reserves, is that what you're asking?
Well, not general fund reserves, but just, I mean, there's any number of places we could pull this out of currently. We could pull it out of our, we do have 7 months of reserves. We only need 4 to 5 months of reserves. Then we also have, I don't have the exact number, the number of the ARPA grant that we recently received, that we haven't obligated any money out of that as well, if I'm correct. So
We
the money
have a-
could go out of either of those two sources, correct?
Could go out of the ARPA grant. The other two ARPA grants, we have obligated all of those. It could come out of general fund reserves, which we do have 7 months of reserves. It could be done by other cuts. It could be done by increasing property taxes. We have budgeted a $15,000 contingency on page 34. So that's almost all of it. I would leave $3,000.
So we have a motion on the floor, an amendment to the budget. And it sounds like there's some confusion. We have 2 more readings. We have 4 more weeks, another month to get an idea of where we want to take the money from. So we either table this to the next meeting, or we can withdraw the motion, or we could just vote on it. And I think we should, without sitting there and talking about where we're going to bring the money from, we've got an amendment to the budget motion on the floor, and that's been amended without a motion to amend. I think you only amend things a couple times. I think it'd be clearer to just either vote on this or just withdraw the motion and bring it up to one of the other readings.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I'll withdraw my motion.
Is the seconder of this motion willing to withdraw it? Okay.
Yes. But I'd like to make a new motion that we increase the Mountain View food service budget to $43,000. And where this money will come out in the future will be determined in the future.
Any discussion on that? And is there a second for that?
Yes.
Okay. Member Marsh.
Thank you. It sounds like starting a project without the ability to fund it. I don't think that's a wise idea, financial or otherwise. So if we were to entertain the possibility of using assembly member stipends to fund this, there has to be a process to get the approval. There also has to be a process to go through the 3 readings to get this. We're about, maybe we would theoretically be about in the same place, time-wise. And in the interim, I'll just toss it out there. Maybe those who are over 60 and can participate in this program could get their $7 donation, but exceed that donation to help the program continue. If people can donate at a higher level, and obviously that's not an assembly decision, but that's just a possibility to buy us time to get this process going so that they can be funded to feed more people who are actually needing these services.
Okay, is there any other discussion on this amendment to the budget to up the Mountain View food service from 25,000 to 43,000? My opinion is, I'm in favor of the funding, but I'm not gonna vote for this as it's presented today because we don't know where the money's coming from. It sounds like there is possibilities, other places to get the money from in our budget. So I would wait to have a more clear decision on where the money's gonna come from included in this, which is what the manager requested. So any other discussion? Okay, will the clerk call a roll on the amendment to up the Mountain View food service funding from 25,000 to 43,000? I believe that is the motion that's on the floor that we're voting on, correct?
It is, and the rest of the motion is with the funds figured out later. We don't know where the funds are coming from.
So, okay, sorry.
And if there's no other discussion, let's move forward on the budget in case there's more amendments. This could go all day. Will the clerk call the roll?
Yes. Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
No.
David,
Yes.
Donna, Thomas,
No.
Mark,
No.
Scott,
Yes.
Okay, the motion fails. I don't think with the 4-3 vote, and I don't think it's the feeling of the assembly not to do that. It's just the confusion involved. So with that being said, we still have a motion on the floor, the main motion to adopt ordinance 2023-04 for the fiscal year 2024 budget. Member Mucci.
Thank you. On page 25, under Borough Attorney that we have budgeted, we have $100,000 budgeted for the next fiscal year. And over the last, I guess, month, we added $90,000 part of the supplemental budget for the 3 lawsuits that we had against the borough, and last year's budget turned out to be $180,000. Can somebody explain to me why we're at $100,000 and not 180, or is this just the best guess scenario?
Finance director or the manager have an explanation?
I'll start if that's okay.
Yeah.
and let others jump in. Honestly, we don't know what the final numbers will be. So we had to kind of base it on what we thought might occur. It is entirely possible that more money would be spent and we'd have to come back to this someone. We don't really have much control over the lawsuits and what numbers would be spent there. I mean, sorry, but that's the truth of it.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on the first reading of our budget? Member Marsh and then Member Feinwolf.
Thank you. Regarding this Secure Rural Schools Fund, so that is all appropriated for the school. When that program retires, is there a plan, both on the borough level and perhaps on school level to make up that difference? Or will it be a perpetual, we're gonna ask, we haven't asked for 20 years, so now we're gonna make up the difference and we're gonna ask, $1 million in successive years?
Can you explain that? I mean, secure rural schools, I don't believe all of the funding goes to the school, does it?
If I may,
Better
through the
be
mayor. So secure rural schools comes, from basically through the Forest Service, process. We continue to get payments for that, although there's a threat every year that it will go away. I cannot speak to whether that will continue or not. Other than I've been here 11 years and every year we've heard it's going to go away and we've got it every year. So for the moment anyway, it's a good stuff. Petersburg built up a balance where 85% of that is set aside for the school, 15%, get the numbers right, is for roads. So we put that into an account just for road maintenance and such. The 85% that is dedicated for the schools, we don't touch that except for school functions. So the school district can say they need some of it for capital projects. They can use it for, in this case, the current budget supports using it to match what the schools asked for. And the answer is what happens when that fund's gone, then I can't answer that. That would be up to the assembly to decide how they want to, backfill that. So yeah, I can't answer a future question. I just don't, but you're asking the right question. Is that long-term, where would that money come from if secure schools account was emptied? And it'd be a tough call.
Thank you.
Brian Walsh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just, before we get into the weeds with any more amendments, I wanted to say that I broadly support this budget, and I'm really glad that our school representatives have come and forcefully made the case for additional school funding. And it's great to see Petersburg making an effort to fund our schools, at or near the cap. That's really encouraging. And I also want to thank Finance Director Jody Tao for putting together this budget and really going above and beyond and making it work under, really adverse circumstances, as we've all talked about. It's been difficult to make all the numbers work. And as Member Marsh brings up, there is some question as to whether or not this is going to be sustainable on the long run. But I think thanks to the work our finance director and manager and school board personnel have done, this is something that we can manage for the foreseeable future, at least until, to get us. Yeah. So that's good. I'm really encouraged by that. That's all I have to say.
Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you. Speaking of roads, I noticed there's no money in the budget for plowing out of Papke's. Part of my question is, are we not going to plow Papke's next winter or maintain the roads there? And on the road issue, are we just doing borough roads, or are we still doing anything with private roads, maintaining or plowing private roads?
Through the mayor. Several different questions there, so I'll answer the last one first. So the borough continues to do some plowing and grading on non-owned roads. They are primarily within Service Area 1 and have been done for probably more years than I've been alive. I've asked Public Works Director Cotta to continue down creating an inventory so we know exactly who owns what roads and what services have been provided through a lot of years. So we're not making changes to any of that right now, although I could see that maybe in the future. But I think that's an assembly level discussion because it's been happening for, again, generations. The borough could rightfully, I suppose, say we're not going to do that anymore, but we've kind of set expectations for a very long time. So I think that conversation has to happen later. For the purposes of this budget, your first question is, yes, we removed the Papke snow removal out of this. The state plows Papke's road. The borough was plowing some of the side roads, and that is taken out of that. We had been budgeting $10,000 for that, and it grew last year with the increased snow. And can't remember what it ended up at, but Chris can probably tell us. But again, this was a very difficult budget. Trying to balance it and keep it balanced has been a bit of a headache. And that was one of the, we did a lot of small things to try to get us to a point where we had enough money to balance it. That was one of the small things we took out of the budget.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Scott? Oop.
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Donna?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Okay, the first reading of the fiscal year 2024 budget passes unanimously. That brings us to item D under new business. This is ordinance 2023-09. This is an ordinance repealing chapters 11.48, 11.52, 11.56, and 11.60 of the former city code and chapter 11.96 and amending of sections 11.12, 11.040, 14.20.360, and 14.20.380. Excuse me. Approved in 3 readings, this ordinance will repeal old traffic and parking code, update parking restrictions in current borough code, allow for the harbor to enforce traffic and parking ordinances at borough harbor facilities, and establish a $25 penalty for parking in violation in harbor facilities. Entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its first reading.
So move.
Second.
Motion made by member Mucci, seconded by member Marsh. Discussion. Member Lynn.
Yeah, I have a couple questions here. One of them relates to giving the authority to issue tickets and so forth in the harbors to the harbor staff. Does that increase our liabilities, increase our insurance rates, increase our liabilities, since those people are not law enforcement officers?
I don't know who has the answer.
I'll
for that.
start the answer, as long as Chief Kerr and Harbor Master Wallen can jump in. So, many years ago, we used to have a part-time traffic person and animal control person. That was a position that we gave up to try to save some money a long time ago when, police kind of filled in the blanks on traffic control. And we didn't really need an animal control, other than actually our police officers end up doing that work. So that posed a problem for the harbor, which was unanticipated at the time. So meaning people will park in the harbor parking lots without a permit, and then there's no places for the people with permits to park. So Harbor Master Wallen asked for permission to write tickets in the harbor, and we've been doing that ever since. Now you two have to jump in and explain how it works.
Well, so it's similar as if we have other violations that happen in the harbor, we have a ticket system. And we issue those tickets and we expect to be paid. We have a situation in the harbor where we've got posted 4-hour, 24-hour, 72-hour, 7-day, and 30-day, all posted. So we need to enforce those. Sometimes it'll happen where we'll get, people that'll park and decide it's a good place to park and get on the jet and leave, or go to Bristol Bay, or go fishing in Juneau, or wherever, or not be a customer and be in the harbor. So the way we operate it now is that after the 6th ticket, and we don't see any action by calling the person or getting any activity to move the vehicle, then we have a boot. We have boots in the harbor that we put on the vehicle, and then the person that is in violation, in order to get the boot off, comes and whatever, pleads their case, and we dismiss or we get them to pay or whatever. That way, it's just all kept in-house. It's pretty simple to manage and operate. We have a crew. I have a crew that's there 24 hours a day, and they, part of our duty is daily to go through and document the harbor parking situation. So it's a big part of, I have a couple of guys that do it daily. Then when it comes time to, the boot's been on for 2 weeks and we're not seeing any activity, then we go to the police. We request them to get involved to take the vehicle to the impound lot. And then it enters into the system that way. And the person in violation can then come through to the borough, get their vehicle out of Hawk by paying all the fees that include the fee to tow the vehicle up to the impound lot. There's an impound fee, as well as a $2 a day fee for storage at the impound lot. And if that never happens, then we end up annually getting rid of those vehicles that have been abandoned in the harbor and made it through the system. So that's how we operate it. It's been working well for about 5 years, 6 years. And that, for lack of a better system, that's what we have. We don't have a parking enforcement within the borough. And so that's the way we've been handling it. And it's now it needs to be in the code.
Through the mayor, Jim, I mean, do you see any liability issues with how we're doing this?
No, because we help the harbor. Once we receive the vehicle, the police department takes over. We send out the notices so that we can get the vehicle through that process. And then most of the time, the ones that are left are junk and they're destroyed. We don't want them back out on the street.
Member Lynn?
A follow-up question to that then. Is that, do we need to amend what's in what we have in the ordinance to include those procedures? So that if in case we did get into a much more detailed situation, that we're covered in terms of procedures?
Are we doing that by repealing the chapters and
Yes, it's in the state statutes and we follow that. So we're covered by the law.
Okay, thank you.
any other questions on the ordinance 2023-09? Clerk, call the roll.
David,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Donna,
Okay, ordinance 2023-09 passes unanimously. We're on to ordinance 2023-10. This is an ordinance amending section 12-12-030, section A of chapter 16.12, acquisition and disposal of borough-owned lands of the Petersburg Municipal Code to add federally recognized tribes to the list of entities that may purchase borough property for less than assessed value if determined by the assembly to be in the best interest of the borough. If approved in 3 readings, this ordinance will allow the assembly to determine if it is in the best interest of the borough to sell borough-owned land at less than assessed value to federally recognized tribes, as well as to state and federal agencies and nonprofit entities. I'd entertain a motion to approve this ordinance in its first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by member Mucci, seconded by member Lim. Discussion. Member Mucci.
Thank you. I want to thank the city clerk for putting this together. I was requested to have it on the agenda. This approach by President Chris Morrison about getting this on there so that they could possibly be building an apartment complex as well as a couple of rental houses on some property that they've identified, and this will give them the opportunity to do that. So that's why it's there today. Thank you.
Marsh?
Yes, thank you. So it looks like that there, in addition to federally recognized tribes, there is another list, or this would be added to that list. And I'm wondering who else is on that list of entities who may purchase property for less than assessed value. And then secondly, if the demand is there, could you go through the process, walk me through the process of why it's a greater value to sell it less than assessed value than fair market value?
I don't have an explanation, but I would assume it would be to open up property.
I can answer part of it.
Thank
So
you.
if that, so through the mayor, the list of entities is actually a borough code. And it basically, I'll read it, where we go here. There it is. Disposal to a state or federal agency or nonprofit entity or for purposes of economic development. So it's fairly broad. Adding federally recognized tribe to that list would fit in with what PIA is trying to accomplish. So that's where the list comes from. Now, the second part of your question, Chad or Chairman Morrison may be best speak to that from PIA, if you wish.
Chris Morrison, I'm the PIA Tribal Council President. We are merely asking in this ordinance to recognize that tribal governments are equal to federal and state. The federal government recognizes tribal governments as sovereign, as does the state. The borough ordinances are silent as to tribal governments. So this is our first step at having the borough recognize our sovereignty.
Somewhat.
Member Kinsinger.
I think it's in the best interest of the borough that anybody that wants to develop multifamily units, condos, whatever you want to call them, we have an abundance of land, but we need to get it out so that people can use it. So I'm very much in support of this, and I'll go on record right now saying that any borough land, that if anybody comes up with a credible plan that will address the housing shortage in this community, I'd entertain the notion that we should just give them the land, not even charge it for them. So not even fair market value. But that said, every parcel has to come before the borough, before the assembly, and we have to decide whether that's what we want to do or not. So it's not like saying we're just going to give all this land away for free. It's just that we can look at each project. So when PIA comes up with a project to put up an apartment building, if we feel it's in the best interest of the borough, we can just give them an in-kind donation of that property or a nominal amount for that property. The one thing that this borough has is an abundance of raw land, and the one thing that the borough does not have is an abundance of available affordable housing.
Any other discussion on ordinance 2023-10? Clerk, call the roll. Oh, Member Newman.
Mayor. So if this passes and then PIA gets land, will they have sovereignty on that land inside the borough?
I can't answer that, but I wouldn't imagine so.
I can try. President Morrison may have to correct me if I get any of this wrong. So PIA has, in my opinion, has sovereignty regardless of what the assembly does with this. But we have an ordinance that needs to spell it out because that's how we do business. From the standpoint of how the land is handled, once it's, let's say PIA approaches the assembly about turning that land over to them for some whatever fee or whatever. Then they own it just like you would own your house in that sense. If they in the future decide to build on that, then they are not, let's see if I get this right, Chris, you're not taxed on the land, you are taxed on the improvements. Sorry, you were into areas I'm not exactly the expert on for sure.
That's another ordinance in the future. We got this one on there. If this passes, then we would be looking at suggesting that the borough amend your definitions, the appropriate definitions to include tribal governments. You have a definition for state and federal, and then you would need to add one for tribal governments as well, or federally recognized tribes. And then the third ordinance that I will be asking to be amended is the one for exemptions for property tax, because at this point, PIA is not exempt. Other governments are, but our tribal government is not. Those were the three that I identified. I went to the ordinances, I did a search for government, for federal, for state. Those are the three that came up that would be pertinent to having tribally or federally recognized tribes added to. So no, the land, we're a sovereign government, but the land we don't have sovereignty over. If we had a reservation, that's a different matter, but we do not.
Thank you, sorry.
Thank you.
That's excellent. Okay, any other discussion on ordinance 2023-10? The non-clerk call the roll.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
Yes.
Thomas, Mark,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2023-10 passes unanimously in its first reading. Item F, in-kind services for disposal of material. Assembly Member Lynn and the Petersburg Medical Center request approval for the borough to provide in-kind services for disposal of material into the borough's mud dump if Petersburg Medical Center obtains a grant from the Denali Commission for off-site construction. For example, to improve Excel Street in support of a new hospital. I'd entertain a motion to approve this request.
Don't move. Second.
Motion been made by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Mucci, I believe. Discussion. Member Lynn.
If I could, I would ask Carl to give a little explanation. If this grant comes about, it's about $1.5 million from the Denali Commission, what it does and what it's intended to do, if you would, please.
Or through the mayor. So I think the intention of the hospital is to use this grant in part to improve utilities and some off-site infrastructure leading up to their building site. And so that work is not insignificant. They're looking at upgrading water and sewer, or excuse me, sewer in a block of Joe Street between 8th and 9th. And also making some provisions to carry power to the property on Fram Street and also up Excel to 10th Street. And then improving, just the road above 10th Street on Excel to help out with the traffic in the ball field area. So they are looking at a pretty significant improvement to the surrounding area as part of this grant. And I think Member Lynn's a request for waiving of the dump fees is in keeping with the history on this issue for borough projects anyway. This is a pseudo borough project, and other borough projects have not been subject to mud dump fees either. So I think that's my 2 cents. Chris Cotta may have a different take on it.
Any other discussion by assembly members on this request? So, Member Lynn, maybe you could clarify, this is, I guess it's in the wording, but this is just using the mud dump for the improvements of, offsite construction, not for the footprint
No,
of the
no.
building.
It's simply to get, it would widen the road on XL and it would improve the sewer water on a couple other streets at the same time to provide access to it, but not at the site, just to the site,
Yeah,
just to it.
just wanted to clarify that.
And let me actually add one other thing is that what it does, if that, we wouldn't do anything if that grant doesn't come through, then obviously it's Mox Nick, so to speak.
If there's no other discussion, clerk call the roll on this in-kind services request.
Mark,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Scott,
Yeah.
Jeff,
Yes.
Okay. Next item G, under new business, 2023 fuel adjustment charge for the annual SEPA maintenance shutdown. Per Petersburg Municipal Code 14.16.720 rates, fuel, and purchase power adjustment charge. The Assembly has the discretion to implement a fuel adjustment charge to all kilowatt hours sold in the billing period that includes the annual SEPA maintenance shutdown and the resulting 10-day diesel plant run by our electric utility. Utility Director Hagerman is requesting the fuel adjustment charge be implemented for the billing period between May 27th and June 27th of 2023. Entertain a motion to approve this fuel charge adjustment.
Don't move. Second.
Motion been made by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Mucci. Discussion. Clerk, Member Kinsinger.
Yeah, just a quick question to Carl. I know I'm asking you to forecast fuel prices and how long this is going to go on, but approximately how much are a range, I guess, of what people could expect on their bill?
Sure. So that in the packet, through the mayor, in the packet, there was a memo that described a hypothetical scenario based on the fuel prices on that day that the memo was drafted, and the amount of power that we generated last June, as well as the total sales, electrical sales for that month as well. And and all that is 2.4 cents per kilowatt hour. And that would be an adjustment to any kilowatt hour that was on a customer's bill in that June billing period. That would be actually charged in the following billing in July. We have to wait until the very end of that. All the meter reading is done and for the calculation to take place. Under that scenario, a residential customer, I did pull up some information from last June on various customer classes, and this is not in the memo, but the average usage for a residential customer last June was 856 kilowatt hours. So using the same adjustment fee as calculated for this year, that customer would see a surcharge of $21.15. A harbor customer last June used 265 kilowatt hours on average. And so that adjustment for them this year would be $6.56. A small commercial customer last year used an average 1,361 kilowatt hours. And so their adjustment this year would be $33.63. And large commercial customers use on average 39,000 kilowatt hours in the month of June. And so their adjustment would be $964 roughly. Again, it's a hypothetical right now because as Member Kinsinger said, there's so many factors that influence how this all comes out in the end. Fuel price, of course, is a big part of it. The amount of energy that we generate with our diesels during this time period has a huge effect on it, and the overall usage of the community also has an effect on it. So if the assembly is amenable to putting this in place again this year, as stated in the memo, we will be putting out a public information campaign requesting that the community conserve power in the subject billing period. It will help us, all of us out. You know, we'll reduce everybody's diesel adjustment if people are able to conserve.
Kinsinger.
Yes, thank you. And for everybody that's listening. So if I want to save money on my electric bill for the next billing cycle, I need to conserve energy for the entire month, not just during the diesel shutdown period. Is that correct?
That is correct, because the amount of energy that's produced by our diesel generators is offset by the total amount of usage of the community during that same time period. So if you only conserve during the diesel shutdown, it helps us burn less fuel. But if you go back to normal at the end of that, before the end of the billing period, it will increase the surcharge.
Any other discussions on the fuel adjustment charge? Clerk, call a roll.
Donna,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Turn your lights off. So next item under new business H, Community Center Sewer Line Repair Project. Parks and Recreation Director Payne has received biddable documents and they're attached to the agenda for the Community Center Sewer Line Repair Project and is seeking assembly approval to send the project out to bid. So what I'm reading here is this is just basically send out a request for proposals for a bid.
We want to
Or
put it
to
out,
bid.
we want to put it out to bid.
Right.
Correct. We have not done, it is budgeted in this upcoming year, coming out of property development funds. And we basically would like to get it out to bid on the street here pretty quick because it'll take a while to get bids back.
So I'd entertain a motion to approve, send this request out to bid.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by member Mucci, seconded by member Lynn. Any discussion? Member Lynn?
Just a question. If we go out for bid, it looks to me most of the work then will be actually be done in next year and then in the, probably even go into the following year. Is that?
Through the mayor, we expect it to be a, 4 to 6 week project, Steph? Is that kind of
They're
what?
estimating about a month for the project, but who knows what can happen? But ideally, a month for the project in whole.
So if we go out to bid here in the next, say, month, and then we give contractors another month to, respond, and then they have to schedule it, order parts and stuff, we're definitely into next year's budget before this work gets done. And we think it can be done the same again in a month. So I think we're good.
Thank you.
Any other questions about this? Sending it out to bid. Clerk, call the roll.
Thomas,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Donna, Mark.
Yes. Next item under new business, Pump Station 4 upgrade and final design award. Utility Director Hagerman recommends P&D engineers be awarded a contract amendment in the amount of $245,600 to complete the project design, permitting, survey, and plating for the Pump Station 4 replacement project. I'd entertain a motion to approve this request.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by member Mucci, seconded by member Marsh. Any discussion? I have a question of Utility Director Hagerman. So this is in addition to money we've already paid P&D for work on this project, or is this the $245,000 is not just to have them complete the work?
Mr. Mayor, so this is an amendment to a previously approved contract with them. We started this project about 4 years ago to do a design study and figure out if we could replace a force main in Sandy Beach Road without having to trench and cut into the asphalt. And the result of that study was the best solution was to push the force main up into the undeveloped right of way behind the pump station. And then the pandemic got in the way, and the project hit a hiatus for a couple of years. And as I was getting the project ramped up again, we approved a smaller contract amendment to get the project restarted and look at different routing for the force maining, mostly because of the ongoing discussion of housing and subdivision development. And so you'll see in the information in the packet, the force main is now routed perpendicular to Nordic Drive, straight back to Augusta Street, and then down, basically following the existing Hungry Point Trail routing to Sandy Beach Road. And that would it does a couple things. It shortens up the force main so we can use smaller horsepower pumps and save energy. But it also allows for some gravity sewer to be installed, and that opens up some possibility for development at the site. To get to all that, what I just said required P&D to look pretty closely at all these options and ferret out different approaches to the project. And so they had just completed, that's also in the packet, alternative design, alternative discussion. And at this point, we're finally ready to pick a direction and get the actual design put together so that it can be bid on by contractors.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. Any other member Lynn?
Follow up to that. If approving that, then when I read that, there was 3 options in there. So we would also be selecting the option that was recommended by the contractor?
Yes, in essence, yes. The selected option by the department is known as A.2.3. And that would not only route the force main back as I described, it will move the wet well for the pumps and install a valve vault, and also replace most of the electrical system at the pump station, reusing the existing generator and transfer switch.
And as part of that, the recommendation was that we would need to make some land swap. And if did I read that correctly? Can you run that by us a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So the site of Pump Station 4 is within a borough right of way. And there of course space on the, I guess it would be the east side of the pump station to site a new wet well. But that station is very deep. The existing dry well and wet well is about 25 feet deep. And so if we looked at putting that wet well in the right of way, and any of the existing structures in that area, including the pump station and the generator pad and the home that's fairly close, we're in danger of being undermined by that deep excavation. So the thought was to put it on the other side also, so we reduce our risk as far as undermining existing infrastructure. It also reduces the need for bypass pumping during the project. Otherwise, we'd have to have a pump that's basically pumping all of the wastewater around that station. This is the second largest station that we have in the community, so it's a substantial amount of flow that it receives. We'd be pumping all that wastewater around that station until we could get the infrastructure installed and ready to go. But siting it where we have it positioned now does not require that. We can use the old station pretty much throughout the project, and then at the last minute tie into the new wet well. So it provides a constructability aspect that really saves us some money. And the property owner of next door, there's been some changing of hands of that property, but he's so far very amenable to coming up with a deal. And what he's really requesting is that we exchange borough property for the property that we need at the site for equal value. And he's just looking at some property up in the subdivision where the routing, the force main will go through. And likely the value of the property down on the road with the view is probably likely higher than back in the muskeg there, but we haven't gotten very far on that. Just to know that it's a real possibility, and so far everything looks like it should work out.
Thank you.
So if we don't get agreement with this landowner, is that gonna hinder the process here?
It will shift the location of the wet well back into the right of way, and we'll still have a project, but we'll have higher risk and higher costs.
Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Okay, that request passes unanimously. That brings us to item J, Borough Hiring Procedures Review. Assembly members Newman and Mucci request assembly approval to direct Borough Administration to hire an independent specialist to review the borough's current hiring procedures. I'd entertain a motion to approve this request.
So move.
Second.
Motion been made by member Kinsinger, seconded by member Marsh. Discussion. Member Marsh.
Would this be an appropriate time to propose an amendment to this?
What?
Okay, thank you. And that would be to not just investigate the current hiring procedures, but look back into 2015 to the present. I know one of the people who testified mentioned the FLA that the Forest Service uses. And in that was mentioned the gap, what the employer thinks is going on, from a position of administration to what's actually going on in the field. I think there was a big gap in this situation as well. And I wonder if it would be prudent to take a look. I know that was a long rambled
So your
amendment,
amendment
to-
in short would be
to
to.
extend the review from 2015 to current.
Second for that amendment.
Second.
Okay, motion been made to amend this, request, and seconded by, motion made by member, Marsh, seconded by member Mutry. Discussion on the amendment. Member Kensker.
Yes, what I see us basically doing here today is directing the borough either through the manager, our insurance company, or the borough attorney to hire somebody to do this review. And then when that person has done the review, I would assume they're going to come back to us and they're going to present the results of what they have found. And then as a result of those findings, I would propose that as a deliberative body, that we through ordinance establish what hiring procedures and safety protocols that we'd like to have. But that said, we need to have some parameters so that whoever we direct to do this can look at. So I see this as like all things in government, it's going to take a while to pull off. But if we spend our time doing this, and I think it is important that whoever does this review, obviously we'll have to look back to see what happened in the past. And so that said, I don't know how to make this any simpler or more complicated, but that's just, I'd like to see that, so I'm going to support this.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Clerk, call the roll on the amendment to cover the dates from 2015, which is prior to the accident, to present, and see if what our policies were or what they require or they suggest that we should change. So this is on the amendment.
Jeff,
Yes.
Scott,
No.
Donna,
Yes.
Bob,
No.
Thomas,
No.
Mark,
No.
David,
Yes.
Okay, back to the main motion to hire an independent specialist to review the borough's current hiring procedures. And I've got a question of, I guess, the clerk or the manager. If we vote for this, we get an independent specialist. Does it come back to the assembly with, if you send out an RFP and you get X, Y, and Z applicants for this, do we get to decide who it is, or is that the administration?
I don't know that it actually has to be an RFP. To be honest, I
Request for
think we could just, yeah.
So then we go over the request for proposals. Are you recommend which one?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it needs to be an RFP.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on, I would have to look at code. Do you know?
It's professional services.
So I-
So you don't, it does not have to be bid out or even an RFP.
Yeah.
So we could bring, some alternatives to you in the assembly, vote on it, or you could tell us to just go hire somebody. Just depends on how you want to approach it.
Member Lynn?
I have a number of questions. Are we looking at our hiring? Are we looking at our safety practices, which is, I believe, what was asked for? Or what's the breadth of this? And we have, if I could ask the clerk, we have a whole bunch of different safety things in place from OSHA on up. Can you describe for me what the breadth of that is, what we're talking about from that perspective?
So are you talking about on the safety side?
Yes.
Reviewing our safety
Yes.
procedures or whatever? So each department has its own safety manual because of course, every department does different things. For instance, Public Works safety manual is about 4 or 5 inches thick. Parks and Recreation is going to have a different manual because they do different things. We, right now, currently, I think this is what you're asking. OSHA, of course, comes through town every once in a while and pops in to whatever department they want to. Recently, I know they were at the Manor. I believe they went to Parks and Rec as well. I'm not positive about that, but I think they did. So that happens. Also, our liability carrier, Alaska Public Entity Insurance, they send down their loss control manager, Cole Cummins, every few years. He also goes through all of our facilities when he's here. I'm pretty sure he's willing to come anytime we ask him to as well. He looks at our safety manuals. He makes recommendations as to, what we may need to upgrade or if, we're doing good, whatever. Is that what you were asking?
Yes. And part of that is that I'm asking, I guess, our members, members Mucci and Scott, is this what you had in mind? Is this?
Yep. Yeah, thank you. Good question. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more amendments to this motion that would more or less lay out some of the parameters that I'd like to see looked at. So, yeah, I think by the time we're through with this conversation, it might be a little bit more defined after we look at the amendments, and maybe there's other issues that people would like to look at, because I think it is important to kind of put some guidelines about what we want this independent review to look at. That answers your question.
Yeah, partly.
Okay, so, to give a timeline of how this came about for me, because I'm on the assembly after the accident happened. The parks had a lawsuit against the borough, which was settled through the Alaska Supreme Court with a determination of no intent. There was no intent to harm. That was under the workman's comp law. Parks approached the borough through a number of letters and then actual and personal phone calls. I sat and talked with them once for 2.5 hours and then 2 different phone calls. And this is where I stand. My position is they're one half of the parties involved in this situation. So our role, or my role as an assembly member, is to listen to the public and listen to to ensure, moving forward, to ensure that what happened doesn't happen again. We have that obligation to society to promote rules, regulations, practices, whatever, that will ensure the safety of our employees moving forward. At the same time, I don't feel that there's any, I hear a lot of discussion about going back and reviewing what happened, we talked about the how and the why of it. And I question the merits of that. Things have changed, people have changed, some people have moved. I don't feel like it's, I kind of look at it like it's a potential can of worms. There's a law of unintended consequences. If we open this thing back up again, we really have no idea what is going to come out of it. And then in respect to the other people that are involved in this, everybody deals with it in a different way. And I don't feel like it's, I don't feel like it's in the best interest of the public at whole to go back and revisit some of those things. It's a highly emotional issue. I feel like the best thing to do is to ensure that this doesn't happen again through the HR hiring practices. So my intent is let's make sure this doesn't happen again. Let's not go back and open up this huge potential issue, because who knows what's going to come of that. But let's move forward and ensure that future employees are not at risk of anything like this ever happening again.
Any other discussion on this? Member Mucci.
Yeah, I'd like to, I don't know how we want to do this, but I have like 5 or 6 amendments to this. That I'd like to, maybe I'll just go through and click them off.
One at a time would
Yeah.
probably be best.
Yep. So my first amendment would be, as part of this review, and that's what I'm focused on is the review is, part of this review should entail a job safety analysis, which is a written procedural guide that helps integrate accepted safety and health principles into a particular task or job. So that's my first amendment.
So you want this independent specialist to give us a recommendation on what our safety protocol should be?
Under this, thank you. Under this one, it would be, it's called the job safety analysis. Just have them look at the job safety in.
Just do analysis of our safety procedures in Peter.
Yes.
Okay, is there a second to that amendment?
I'll second that.
Discussion. Member Marsh?
I wonder if OSHA already covers that. They are pretty in depth on how things are spelled out, what you can and cannot do. So I just don't want to be redundant, I suppose.
Member Lynn?
I'd like to have, our clerk, weigh in on this since she's part of the HR group. What would that buy us and what would it do, doing a job safety analysis, I assume of every job that we'd have?
Thompson, do you have a answer?
What is the question? I'm not exactly
What is-
sure
What
what
is
that
the
would
job
entail.
safety analysis first, I guess, is my first question.
It's a
And
very
my
good,
second question is then how does that relate to all the jobs we have in the borough?
so I would assume that this person would want to look at all job descriptions
Yes.
and probably safety manuals
Yes.
and maybe equipment. And I mean, I honestly do not know, Bob.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what it would entail. I mean, I understand what OSHA's role has in this, and I'm not interested in getting OSHA involved in this, but I think this is an opportunity to look at the safety culture within the borough. I mean, I don't know. I have no idea what the safety programs are within the borough. And most of these suggestions that I have came from companies I've looked at that's what their sole purpose is jobs, workplace safety and hiring safety. And this would let whoever we hire just have them one thing for them to look at. It might be entail a lot, but at least they could come back to the borough and give us an estimate on what these things would cost us to get done. But I think this is a good opportunity to look at all the stuff within the borough. We've been bound by legal matters not to discuss this, and this is our opportunity to kind of flesh things out a little bit.
Mr. Mayor.
Member Kinsinger?
I don't see this so much, Bob, as we're saying this is what we're going to do. But we hire somebody that's independent to come in and take a look at it, and then they give us recommendations. Then once they give us the recommendations, then we as a deliberative body can sit down and say, that's a good idea. We want to do this. We want to do that in the form of an ordinance. So whatever we do now is all that I see that we're doing now is setting the parameters of what we want this independent person or agency to take a look at and then come back to us with their recommendations. They might come back with the recommendations says, yeah, the OSHA standards are fine. We don't need to do anything different. You know, we can just go down the list of everything that Jeff has, but it just focuses whoever we're going to hire and kind of tells them the things that we're interested in having them accomplish. So, but that doesn't commit us to anything because we have that opportunity when they come back to say, no, that's going to be too expensive. We don't think that's a good idea.
Member Lynn?
I guess I got to go back to what Member Marsh talked about is that going through each of the job descriptions, I don't think does anything. I think what would be more valuable would be to take a look at review the safety manuals, review the whole process in that respect. And there is a couple experts in the state that does that. We have API has a expert in loss that would do an excellent job at looking at all those types of things. That is already, is throughout the state looks at those particular items that we're talking about, rather than going through all the job descriptions. My view anyhow.
This is an amendment to add specific language, if I understand it right, to this borough hiring process procedures review. And it is to, can you state how you have it written down?
To have a job safety analysis included in the duties that we ask them to perform.
Clerk, call the roll. This is on the amendment.
Mark,
Yes.
Donna,
No.
Thomas,
No.
David,
Yes.
Bob,
No.
Scott,
No.
Jeff,
Yes.
Okay, that amendment fails with a 4-3 vote. Any other discussion? Member Mucci.
Yeah, I'd like to make an amendment to this motion to add in the verbiage, looking for whoever is going to do this independent review of an accident prevention plan, which would be an overview of borough policies on workplace hazards, highlight potential problem areas, suggest solutions, and develop a written plan for reducing and eliminating dangers. This includes a detailed safety orientation for all borough employees.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Discussion. Member Mucci.
Yeah, again, this is just some of the guidelines that I'd like for whoever we end up hiring to do this review. Just something that I feel is important for the borough to look at. This is a good opportunity to look at how the borough plans for accident prevention and making sure that we're doing all we can to make sure that borough employees and the community is safe. So, thank you.
Discussion. Member Marsh.
I wonder if this might be a question for department heads, whether or not those safety and accident prevention plan is already in place when somebody is newly hired.
I could ask the clerk, is that in our policies?
Jeff, can you please read the definition again of the accident prevention plan?
An overview of borough policies on workplace hazards, highlight potential problem areas, suggest solutions, and develop a written plan for reducing and eliminating dangers. This includes a detailed safety orientation for all borough employees.
So I would answer that we have our safety manuals, which would be the first part, I believe. Detailed orientation, I would need to defer to our department heads. I would think that Public Works probably goes over safety of driving trucks and equipment and things, but I don't have it in writing, I guess, the detailed orientation.
So, okay, you don't think that is in writing in our policies?
Well, I mean, our practices is definitely in the policies, yes.
Like, remember Marsh stated on the last amendment that was put before us. that, Again, it seems like something you would find when OSHA came and inspected your facilities. You know, they have a pretty stringent list of things you have to abide by, I would imagine, like outlets need to be 3-prong or whatever, and safety railings, et cetera. So,
And I can say that I do know that many of our employees take online safety courses through our liability carrier. We definitely push them to do that because it saves us a little money on our premium as well at the end of the year. The more classes taken, the better, of course. We're all more educated and that's the better for the carrier themselves.
discussion on the second amendment. Member Kinsinger.
I think we're getting bogged down here. I think what we just need to do is we need to hire somebody and they might come back and say, yeah, everything's hunky-dory. You know, if we have a good safety specialist, I don't know what we want to call them. Like Bob says, there's many organizations and agencies out there, but we have to give them some parameters. What do we want them to look at? You know, You know, maybe they'll come back and say, oh, your procedures that you have in place now are perfect. You don't need to have any changes. But I'd hope that this person, whoever or whatever organization it is, could come back and say, well, here's some areas that you could use improvements on. And as a result of that, then we could craft an ordinance to adjust that. But once again, we're not locking ourselves into doing an evaluation of all the safety manuals in the borough. You know, he might come back and that person might come back and say, yeah, we need to look at the safety manuals in the borough. Yeah, we need to look at the hiring practices. And, you know, we can just have it be wide open. But what I think Jeff's amendments are doing is trying to give them some structure of what we want to see as a result come back so we can make a decision. So, I mean, we're not committing to any of this stuff. You know, we're not telling them to do this stuff. We're just telling them to let us know if what we're doing is okay now. What is your recommendation of what we should be doing going forward? And I assume that this person or organization will have experience with other municipal governments, private industry, and they'll just take a look at us and say, hey, this is what everybody else is doing. You should do this. Come back to us. No, we don't like that idea. That's not going to work here in Petersburg because what we're doing now is working. But whatever this costs us, I don't need to tell everybody the expense of what one accident is in terms of human tragedy and ultimate expense to the borough. It's money well spent. So I think we're just getting bogged down on what we want to do. I think we should just leave it open to the borough manager and the borough clerk, and they come back with a couple of different people and some ideas for us. And then we can talk to that person or those individuals, and then we can think about this a little bit more if we want, and then figure out what we want them to do.
So we have any other discussion?
No, so let me make a comment. I mean,
Find more.
yeah, I agree. If it does feel like we're getting bogged down. I mean, we had a lot of testimony at the beginning of this meeting. Obviously, there's a lot of people interested in understanding, you know, what happened in 2016. You know, and I don't really see how this agenda item gets to that. I don't think it's a good idea to just kind of kick this to the borough manager without very clear instructions and make borough admin do make the decision and then just come back to us. I feel like at the very least we should, you know, narrow down the language here, you know, instead of adding things to it. I feel like a lot of the things Member Mucci brought up are just things we could do right now. We don't need to hire a specialist to tell us to do them. You know, but it does seem worthwhile maybe, you know, if people do want to get an outside specialist to come in and give a review of the borough's current hiring procedures for every department and every employee seems like a little broad. And also hiring procedures don't really get at, I mean, it's kind of my understanding that, you know, safety protocols, you know, ADA accommodations, you know, communication between departments are really at the heart of this issue, not necessarily hiring protocols. I don't know if it was necessarily a hiring issue. So it seems like that language should be changed. I'd welcome amendments to that effect. But it just strikes me as putting the cart in front of the horse a little bit to add all these amendments to this action item when we don't even know who's this independent specialist. That's just a word we made up. Who is that person or company? You know, they would probably, I feel like they should be a part of this conversation because they're going to be the ones with the expertise and like the way of doing things, you know, and depending on who we go with, they're all going to, you know, have different areas of expertise or, you know, different approaches to doing this type of analysis. And it seems like they're probably not going to want to get a laundry list of, you know, things like, oh, we want this, you know, safety review, safety analysis, blah, blah, blah. It seems like it might be better to get in touch with someone like this first and then see what their, you know, what their suggestions are before firing it off to the manager. Anyway, that's my 2 cents here.
Okay, so we have an amendment on the floor to instruct the independent specialist, if we decide to hire one, for safety. Is that what the Second Amendment is?
An accident prevention plan.
Accident prevention. So that's what we're discussing. The clerk call the roll.
Mark? Jeff?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Scott?
No.
Donna?
No.
No.
Bob?
No.
Okay, so that amendment fails with a 5-2 vote with members Kinsinger and Mucci in support. Would it be easier to, just a thought, to change the language? To hire an independent special review the borough's current hiring procedures and the hiring and safety procedures? I mean, just a thought.
It's my interpretation that the intent here for the parks through discussions with them, they're the reason we're here, is to ensure that this never happens again. That's the intent. So if we tailor it to that intent, I mean, it has to do with, somebody driving. So, I mean, if we can narrow it up, put a little bit of sideboards on it, so it doesn't apply to, the harbor department changing out a hose clamp on this is about people driving vehicles. And, can we tailor it to that end? Thank you.
I'm gonna try an alternative approach here to it. And I agree. That, and I've also talked to Mr. and Mrs. Parks. I'm gonna make a motion to ask API's loss expert to review safety policies, procedures for the borough. That it's an organization we use. They have some very detailed employees that are experts in these fields. And that's what I'm proposing that we ask them to take a look at it. We can expand it at a later time. After that individual takes a look at it, and all that information would come back to us after they reviewed everything we have on the books.
Second for that.
I'll second that, and then I have a question.
Um,
Could you explain a little bit more what API is again?
I can do that. I think there's somebody better here in the room to explain that. If the clerk would do that, I would appreciate it.
Alaska Public Entity Insurance. They are our liability carrier, property insurance, personal liability, auto insurance.
Thank you.
Member Kinsinger.
The one question I want to see answered is, whoever does this review, I'd like them to say, do our current procedures and policies, are they sufficient enough to prevent an accident like occurred 2016, July 4th?
If we were able to get the individual I'm talking about, the answer is yes. They're experts in that field. But I also think this is a one-time, one go. I think that once that individual would come back, or those come back to us, I think we're going to have follow up to, from some others. I don't think this is a one shot fits all, so to speak.
I also feel like it's important that, if we decide to go forward with this, that, now the clerk and the manager, they're the ones with the feet on the ground and making phone calls, that I believe that, their choices or recommendations need to come back to the assembly for our approval before we move forward.
Member Mucci.
Yeah, this is a difficult subject to talk about, and we've heard several times this afternoon here about how we want to put sideboards on stuff or guidelines on it, and without talking about the guidelines that we want to have on there, we really don't have a way of approaching somebody, whether it's a workplace safety company that does this for a living or an insurance agency that does this, but I think it's, I think there's several things that I'm pretty sure we don't have in place that we need to have some guidelines about. Yeah, these are some things that we want this independent review to look at, and whether it's the insurance company or whoever, I think it's important that it look like an independent review. Maybe the city attorney is the best person to look at it. I know there's a lot of feelings with city staff about what went on back there, and I want to make sure that it's looked at with clear eyes. And, these guidelines that I got off the company that we use for background checks, their website, these are all items that they do on a regular basis to make sure folks have a plan in place if things go haywire. I mean, there's a development of a critical stress response team. I mean, what happens if there's an accident?
We're done discussing the amendment that member Lynn
Sure,
made
but
to
this is
hire
all-
APEI.
Right, but this is all part of, people talk about the guidelines, but if we don't talk about guidelines or what we want to do, then I don't know how we're gonna get the needs of the assembly understood and have whoever we get to do this address these issues.
One way we could do it is if it's APEI or whoever the administration feels is sufficient to doing this, and like Member Newman suggested, they bring it, their recommendation to the assembly, and we say yes or no. And that case drug out process, but it is an important issue. We need to make sure that, employees and residents of the community are safe, and that we follow all the procedures that are recommended. So we're voting whether or not we want to hire APEI, am I correct?
Yes, and my motion was that, to review the, safety, the policy manuals and procedures of our borough as part of this, as a first step in this whole process. And then obviously they're going to come back with recommendations. And I agree with Member Newman, it needs to come back to us for the process.
Okay, we're voting on that amendment to this to hire APEI. Member Newman.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for clerk or the manager. What Bob is proposing, what does that mean? How will that play out, do you think?
Through the mayor. So full disclosure, I sit on the APEI board. So I'm the vice chairman. So APEI is our, as Debbie said, is our liability property carrier. They have staff members, including Cole Cummings, who is totally OSHA certified to do OSHA inspections. So that's what they do. They do it for the reason that they don't like high dollar claims coming through. So they basically try to keep communities like Petersburg who use their services to make sure we do everything safe. Cole's been here any number of times and inspected stuff and found stuff that we should do, and we make those changes. My guess is that he would need something a lot more specific than what we've talked about so far. Somebody, remember Newman mentioned, automobile safety, use of and around heavy. That's probably not a bad add-on to be very specific. OSHA has their own program as well, by the way. You can voluntarily call OSHA in and have them do full OSHA inspections, and actually you get some value out of it. They're kind of locks up your staff for a period of time, but that's always an option too. And one recommendation would be maybe bring Cole here at a time that the assembly could talk to him, maybe online, and you guys talk through this stuff with him and decide if he's the right guy that you want doing this, or maybe he has other recommendations. That's another way to handle it too, is get some of these folks on the phone that you might be interested in, TSS who we use for background checks or whatever, and ask your questions and see if any of them spark a, like, oh, okay, this sounds like the right person to bring in. I mean, that's the best I can answer the question, I guess.
Yeah, I appreciate this, how sensitive this is. And I think we need to be clear that if we're involved with APEI on a board member role, I think we need to make sure that you're not part of the conversation.
Again, that's why I brought it up.
Right.
is-
And by going with just APEI, it shoehorns us into one company. And I would like to look at other companies that do this to see if there is a better fit for what we're trying to do here. I mean, between the hiring process, the safety programs that we have in place, whether there's communication shortfalls or critical response shortfalls. I mean, I think we shouldn't just focus on APEI and have them tell us what they're going to do. I think it's important that the assembly have some suggestions of what they'd like them to look at, because that's only gonna make the borough a safer place to work and the community feel safer. You know, currently we have 86 borough employees. We've got 9 students working for the borough. And I mean, I think there are a lot of questions that haven't been answered, and we haven't had the opportunity to ask those questions so that we can figure out what's best for the community and for the borough employees. And by shoehorning us into the APEI, I hope we're not making it too narrow. There's somebody else who does workplace safety and communication protocols so that we can really get the most bang for our buck and finally talk about this and get some results for some of the questions that are just hanging out there that we're finally starting to address. So I'm concerned that by focusing just on APEI, that we might not get everything that we need. And I guess we could wait to see what they have to say, but I certainly would like to see the city attorney focused on this so that I know it's a difficult subject to talk about to people who are directly involved with it. And I'd like to keep, you know, I know they're professionals, but I'd like to keep them at arm's length in it, just so that the community knows that we did our due diligence and looked with clear eyes to address some of the concerns that I brought up this afternoon. So yeah, that's where I'm headed with this.
I agree with a lot of what Member Mucci just said, and I feel like yeah, we need to consider different options. And I also have a question for the clerk. So OSHA does come through and do audits or assessments how often, and what is that scope of that?
Well, every few years except during COVID, and it's not a regular schedule. We don't know when they're coming unless we invite them.
Can't invite them. I just.
We
wondered.
can invite them. Yes, we can.
That's with I guess with the mayor. So is it within their capabilities to kind of to do a review? I mean, isn't that what they're doing when they come? They're reviewing all our safety practices already?
Through the mayor. So OSHA looks at primarily, you know, like they wouldn't like that cord right there.
No.
Okay?
Yeah.
They're not gonna be looking at hiring practices. That's not in their
Okay.
forte at all. So they're a safety organization. So occupational safety.
Safety and hazards.
Thank you, thank you. That's what they look for. And they have a program where an entity, can be private sector or the public sector, can invite them in. And when you do that, everything's off the book, meaning they find a cord. Instead of getting fined for it, you're told, fix the cord. And, you know, you get a nice report out of it at the end of it. That's how OSHA operates. Having somebody look at your hiring practices, that's a different animal.
Well,
Go ahead, Paul.
okay, thank you. So what I would like to see here today is because I think this is going to be something we're going to navigate it. This is not going to happen all at once. I think we need to make a decision to move forward with it and in good conscience and healing for the community and the safety of future employees. But this is going to be something that, you know, we need to give you, the clerk and the manager, the authority to move forward with, you know, different options for people, for entities to review the situation and then come back with this and we can revisit this.
If Assembly Member Lynn agrees, I'd like to make an amendment to his amendment that we include, that we direct the borough manager to set up, a Zoom call with, APEI and also with, TSS. And then also to reach out to the borough attorney to see if she has any recommendations and report back to us. And at that point, then we can try and move forward on this. Cause I share the same problem that you all do, you know, where do we go? I mean, I got a lot of ideas. I'm sure everybody else has a lot of ideas. But I think until we hear from some of the experts in the field, what they can offer us, what their recommendations are, then we might decide, well, we want to have this group look at this. We might want to have this group look at this. We might want to have OSHA come here and look at this, but until we have more information about what these different organizations out there can do, I think we're just kind of, I think we're kind of floundering. So if you would consider that to be
So is there a second to the motion, the amendment to the amendment?
I'll second it.
Second.
This is getting way too confusing. I think Member Newman has the right idea to, you know, vote for this or not vote for it. But if we vote for it, you know, the language independent specialist doesn't have to be so specific, you know, the staff, the clerk and the HR people can come up with suggestions. And if we like it, then, you know, let's have a Zoom meeting. But I mean, to go and say you need to do A through Z, you know, it's confusing me, which is easy to do. But, so we have an amendment to the amendment. Is there a second to that?
Yeah, well, back up on procedures, I would withdraw my motion if the second would agree.
Sure.
yes.
And I would substitute Member Kensinger's motion in place of mine.
Which is to have,
Okay, I'll make a stab at it. To direct borough staff to contract APEI and TSS,
Contact, not
Contact.
contract, yes.
yes, contact,
Mhm.
and the borough attorney. And see if they would be, see if they'd be willing to assist us in how to go about this process.
Basically ask them what they can offer us to come up with what we're looking for.
Correct, thank you.
Second.
okay. So the motion's been made to reach out to our attorney, APEI and the other entity,
TSS
TSS,
in Ketchikan.
and get suggestions how to move forward with this. So that was kind of an amendment to this. It's sounds to me like instead of hiring an independent specialist, we're talking to independent specialists on
Before making decisions and moving forward.
ideas, what we're out to do. So I think that follows the gist of this you know, request to do that. And we're starting the process and we'll expand from there. That's my input. Member Mucci?
Yeah, regarding the amendment, if we find out that TSS does not do or look at some of these programs, would we have the latitude to reach out to other companies that do workplace safety programs?
I
Or
think
are we
if we
just,
don't, if we don't like as a body, the information we get from our attorney, the insurance company and this other entity, then yeah, we move forward on a different route. I think this is a starting point to get explanations from some, I don't call them experts or whatever you want to call them, to guide us in what we should do to, you know, I think what we're looking for is to, you know, make sure our policies and hiring and safety procedures are, you know, adequate, and if not adequate, change them and make it the best we can to make it safe for people in the future. So anyway, that's any other discussion on having the clerk reach out to those, or attorney and those, other entities. Or call the roll.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Okay, so we will go through that procedure and, the staff is busy now with, union negotiations, et cetera, so. Next item, K, support for Senate Bill 132, an act imposing an annual educational facilities maintenance construction tax on net earnings from self-employment and wages relating to the administration and enforcement of the educational facilities maintenance and construction tax and providing for an effective date. Senator Click Bishop is sponsoring Senate Bill 132. Alaska Educational Facilities Maintenance and Construction Tax and is seeking letters of support for the bill. Assemblymember Mucci requests the assembly to determine if Petersburg should send a letter of support. So I entertain a motion to send a letter of support.
So move.
Second.
I'll second.
I read a little bit about this and I think it's a $30 per person annual tax that goes to the school, goes into the general fund of the state. So maybe it'll be a raise for the legislators, who knows?
I've read this bill a couple times and I have problems with it. The one is that first of all, it says that the money from this goes into the general fund. Although there's it gets into a special category, but it's also up to what the legislature wants to do with it. It's the way I read the bill. So I have a problem with that part of it. If we were going to send a letter, I would rather see us send something. One of the problems we have, and we have throughout the state, is maintenance of our school facilities. And I think a better way to approach this thing would be to take that money, if you were to do it, and put it into a fund similar to one like we have in the state for sewer water projects, where we can borrow from it and pay it back at about a 1%. So I can't support the bill as it stands. I think there needs to be a couple of changes. One has to be is that money is specifically, goes for school support, not let the legislature decide what it's going to do. But two, more importantly, I think it goes further than that, because when you look at us and you look at the roof that needs to replace at the school, that's a $4 million project. What I think it said in here, this was going to raise $7 million a year by doing this. Well, we'd use the whole amount. And we have a whole state. So I think it needs to be looked at in a broader scale, or at least that money put into some kind of a pool that all of us can draw on, all the municipalities in the state for school maintenance type of things.
I think the problem is the state constitution doesn't allow designated funds. It's a real difficult thing. I know Marine Highways tried to do that for many, many years and was really not very successful at it. And then also any of these quote unquote special funds that are just sitting out there in state government. Well, a couple of years ago, the governor swept them all up. So there's no guarantee that this tax will actually go to that. But I agree with the intent of this, but I think what we need to be a little bit more cognizant on is right now there's a couple of bills in the legislature. One, which we need to take a look at, which is state sales tax, 2% sales tax. You want to talk about a nightmare for communities and for retailers, that's going to be one. And there's another bill that's also proposing a income tax. So I guess basically what I'm going to say is I'm not going to support this specific action right now because I think there's too many moving targets there. But that said, I think we need to educate ourselves what's in the legislature right now really quick between now and the next meeting, if we can have any. I don't think anything's going to move specifically this session, but who knows? But we need to be alert to the sales tax problem. That's going to be a big problem if that goes through.
Through the mayor, we've been working with our Juneau lobbyist on the sales tax issue, and his take is it has very little chance of passing this session, but to keep an eye on it. That, by the way, that's before the governor had a press conference saying that he's going to get it done. So we'll continue to keep an eye on it through our lobbyists. And when he has specific bills that he wants the assembly to kind of react to, I'll make sure and get that to you. But
I've read an article recently about the sales tax and PFDs, and I think it was Ortez and Stedman, and can't remember the other people opposed to a tax and a higher PFD. So you're taxing yourself, give yourself a bigger PFD. It'd be better if they just balanced the budget. So
it's, the governor talked about a special session, the senators and congressmen, the leadership in both the House and the Senate in Alaska, both do not think it can be done that quickly. Anyway, they're all back and forth, but Ray's been doing a great job. He sends periodic, here's what's going on. And I can always have him come talk to you guys at a meeting if you want, or just feed it to you as he sends stuff.
okay, so we're voting whether we're going to send a letter of support for Senate Bill 132. Clerk call the roll.
Scott,
No.
Bob,
No.
Mark,
No.
David,
No.
Thomas,
No.
Donna.
No.
Jeff,
No,
Okay, so that fails unanimously. Item 16, communications. There's a list of communications on the agenda today, can be accessed through our website. We don't read the communications at the assembly meeting. So if you're interested, you can find it on the website. Item 17, discussion items. Member Mucci wanted to give a little update on public safety meeting. I believe.
yeah, thank you. Last Thursday, the Public Safety Advisory Board met and they went through a few items they haven't met in like a year or so. They elected new officers. We heard a report from Director Hankins about emergency response capabilities. There was discussion about Ravens Roost Trail signage and at the crosswalk out by Sandy Beach Park. There was a talk and they approved a handicap access parking on Dolphin Street, close to right on the corner by the Catholic Church. There was talk about a parabolic mirror installed at Hagen and Second Street. That got kind of pushed to the side a little bit to see how it would work with DOT. And then they've appointed Dr. Cicillo as the liaison to the local emergency planning committee. And once the notes are all put together, I'll make sure everybody gets them.
Discussion items. Any assembly members have comments? Member Mark.
Thank you. I appreciate all the work that Finance Director Jody Tao has done for the budget as well as all the department heads. This is no small thing. And I appreciate all your time and efforts in this and creating a balanced budget. So thank you.
Okay.
I just want to pile on to Donna's comments. Yes, thank you, Jody. Thank you, everybody. I know this is a big job and all I can say is if you look around other communities in Southeast Alaska and see where they're sitting budget-wise, we're in really good shape. And I think a lot of that credit's due to Jody, our department heads and our borough manager. And I think we can give ourselves a pat on the back that we're not facing some of the issues that some of our sister communities are facing this budget cycle.
Okay, any other comments? Recognitions. We just did some recognitions. Yeah, that's fine. Pile it all in one item. Any recognitions by staff? Member Hagerman or Mr. Hagerman, Utility Director Hagerman.
Mr. Mayor, I want to thank the mayor and the manager for recognizing two excellent employees that we have at our treatment plants, Mike Bell and Justin Haley. I also want to acknowledge the excellent work that they perform year in and year out. We really have some excellent leadership at our treatment plants, and the awards that they're receiving from the Alaska Water and Wastewater Management Association are well deserved.
Thank you. Any other recognitions by Chief Kerr?
I have one. It's the staff that actually helped out with it, but the text 911 on Sunday actually received the first real text to 911 that we implemented in August of 21 at a cost of $8,000 total. was paid for out of E911. But just to recognize that system, the new phones have that capability to where you can hit the SOS and use that emergency satellite system that they have. And it actually, in Keel Bay, which is the southern end of QU, we received a text from there, a 26-foot North River sank, and the people made it to the beach, and they were actually able to text, which our dispatch did, and they have text communication going back and forth to get the state troopers, the helicopter, and some of the other boats headed that way, and everyone was okay.
Perfect. That's a great story.
Yep.
Yeah, good. The system works. Any other recognitions? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Need a second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nobody's ever opposed. My employer down there is probably chomping at the bit.
Yeah.